Awesome, thank you. The time is just a little bit after 8:30, so we'll begin our meeting. This meeting is now open to the public and we have started recording. We'll begin with our introduction to our Spanish interpretation as well as our language justice statement from Tanya Johnson.
Hello, good morning. My name is Tanya and I'm the interpreter for the Environmental Justice Program at CDPHE. Today I'm working with my colleague, Valentina. I'm going to read the Zoom instructions and the language justice statement first in Spanish, and then I'll repeat it in English. Hola, buenos días. Me llamo Tanya y soy la intérprete del Programa de Justicia Ambiental del Departamento de Salud Pública y Medio Ambiente de Colorado. Hoy estoy trabajando con mi colega Valentina. Antes de comenzar, quiero asegurarme de que todas y todos hayan seleccionado el idioma adecuado en Zoom. Si prefieren escuchar la presentación en español, hagan clic en el globito que aparece en la parte inferior de la pantalla y seleccionen español bajo interpretación. Si están usando un teléfono celular o una tableta, hagan clic en los 3 puntos que están a la derecha donde dice More o Más y eligen el español como su idioma de preferencia. Las y los integrantes de la comunidad están invitados a hacer sus comentarios en español si así lo prefieren. Nuestra organización ha asumido el compromiso de fomentar la justicia lingüística. Invitamos a la comunidad a usar su idioma de preferencia para participar en la reunión. Les agradecemos que hablan lenta y pausadamente y que usen palabras comunes para que sea más fácil de interpretar. Before we get started, I would like to direct everyone to the appropriate language channel on Zoom. If you would prefer to listen in Spanish, please click on the small globe at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. If you are on a tablet or phone, click the 3 dots to the right of your screen that says More and select Spanish there. During the meeting, there may be community members who choose to give their comments in Spanish. If you are not bilingual, you will need to click the English option to be able to hear the interpretation. As an organization, we are committed to language justice. We would like to invite community members to participate in the meeting using their language of preference. In order to facilitate interpretation, please speak slowly, pause often, and use commonly understood vocabulary. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Tanya. Before we get started, I'd like to direct everyone, I think you already said all this. Tanya, let me know if the interpretation is working well. I had a little bit of trouble with it. Thank you, Tanya.
Sorry for interrupting. This is Valentina, and I haven't been assigned as an interpreter.
Yeah,
Great. Let me fix that.
I think we both need to be.
That should now be working, Tanya and Valentina.
Awesome.
Great. Welcome, everybody. I will just now go over to some quick housekeeping Zoom tips. As you can see, we have quite a few participants in person today. So I will try to make sure I'm monitoring the chat if any of the interpreters are having trouble hearing or the mic isn't working. For those of you who have joined virtually, make sure you join by either your phone or your computer audio or both. You can use the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen, or if you've joined by phone, you can press *9 or *6 to mute. As always, this recording is this meeting is being recorded, and we will post the meeting materials on the advisory board webpage, which I will put in the chat in just a moment. And I don't think we'll have as many problems because all the board members are present, so you guys can't turn your cameras off to make sure you're listening. Great. And then non-board members, you guys will have an opportunity to speak during the public comment period. I will turn on the chat function during our scheduled break. Then you can send me your name and affiliation to join the list of those who will speak during the public comment time. And these are just some ground rules to make sure we have a productive meeting and ensure that we can all hear from the advisory board members. Now I will turn it over to Megan.
Thank you, Lauren. And thank you, Tanya, for providing the language justice statement and meeting logistics. Welcome, everyone, to Colorado's 27th Producer Responsibility Advisory Board meeting. Thank you for joining us in person today, for those that are in the room and those that are on Zoom. My name is Megan Maben. I am product stewardship I'm from the Product Stewardship Institute and I'm the facilitator of today's advisory board meeting. First, we'll start with a quick roll call. Board members, when I call your name, please raise your hand or give a wave and say here. Nonprofit seat, Liz Chapman.
Present.
Trade Association seat, Scott DeFife. Okay. Non-front range local government, Gail Gary.
Here.
Retail Association seat, Chris Howes.
I'm here.
Thanks, Chris. Landfill with recycling seat, Barrett Jensen.
I am present.
Thanks, Barrett. Burke seat, Rick Qatar.
Present.
Thanks, Rick. Municipality seat, Caroline Mitchell.
Present.
Caroline. County seat, Jake Neese.
I'm here.
Environmental Justice seat, Junior Ortego.
Here.
Recycling Material Hauler seat, Mark Petrovich.
Here.
Compost Facility seat, Clinton Sander.
Here.
Packaging Supplier seat, Scott Saunders.
Here.
Non-voting Department seat, Wolf Cray.
Here.
Non-voting PRO seat, Peter Hardgrave.
Here.
All right, thanks, everyone. Now, I will move us into the business element of our meeting. So the first item on the agenda is to approve the summary for the last meeting, meeting number 25. Does anyone have any feedback from the meeting?
I have a typo on page 2 under welcome. My name is spelled incorrectly. It's Jake.
Thank you, Jerry. We approve. Need to update.
You can.
We can approve
that.
still approve.
You can approve it as
It's
amended.
not a substantive change, it's just a typo, so. I
Yeah.
think we can. So I'll make a motion to approve the meeting number 25 minutes with the updated typo correction.
I can second those. Gail Gary, City of Steamboat Springs City Council.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We have a unanimous approval of the minutes as amended.
Thank you, Liz and everyone. Next, I'll quickly go through the agenda for today's meeting. So as you can see on the screen here, we will have the first hour of this meeting will be from the glass industry representatives. We'll have 6 different presenters. Provide a bit more information on that one in a minute. We'll then have updates and follow-ups from the last technical working session from Pete, followed by a 5-minute break, and then we'll move into today's discussion topics, which are the producer cues methodology and education and outreach. We'll then have a quick discussion on the upcoming technical work session for June 25th and the topics that we want to cover, followed by public input, and then the meeting summary and next steps. Next, I'll turn over to Wolf to take the talk to the board through a request to speak for the board chair.
Great, thanks, Megan. So we received an email from the chair of California's EPR Advisory Board, and they have requested to have our chair, Dr. Chapman, speak on behalf of Colorado. They'd like to hear about an overview of the board and our deliverables, what processes are in place for our board, and basically what we're looking to do for optimal execution of the law itself. So that meeting will be on June 21st and
July 19th.
July 19th it is. And with that, because our bylaws say that basically we need prior approval from the board to have anyone speak on behalf of the board. That's why we're bringing this up today. Normally Liz would walk us through a vote and discussion, but since this pertains to Liz speaking, I'll turn it back over to Megan to walk us through a board vote and discussion on this.
Wolf. So do any board members have any questions or discussion about the request? Or would someone like to make a motion to approve the board chair speaking at the California EPR Advisory Board?
I'll make a motion to support.
I have a question. Rick Gator, Merck's. So are we you're gonna go speak on our behalf discussing how we're doing what we're doing? Will we get like a summary report of that and we'll be able to see how that went and everything's cool?
My anticipation is you would get a script prior to me speaking and would have the ability to comment on that. And then you would get the report afterwards.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
I can, oh, sorry, go ahead. Scott, if I glass packaging, also a question. Do you think it's engagement about coordination, or do you think it's a report on how Colorado's going?
Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado. I don't think I understand your question.
There are elements of states that have passed EPR that are trying to coordinate certain provisions, responsible end markets, things like that. Harmonizing.
This is Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado. My understanding from their request is these are the things they want to speak to. So it would not be us, it would not be me talking about any of the intricacies of our regulations. It would be what is the process of our board functioning.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be to influence how their regulation is implemented. It's more about how does their board function is my understanding.
Yeah. Wolf Cray, CDPHE, just to clarify, would be speaking on behalf of the board's role, what we're doing. That's the understanding. If it's outside of board business, such as like CDPHE's regulations, how we're implementing the act, all that, that would be to us. We'd be talking about that. That's why Liz would be representing the board in this instance, because it's specific to the board's role. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, it's Peter Hargreaves, CAA. CAA has met with CalRecycle already to walk them through the process, the needs assessment process. So they were very interested in more, bluntly, just how do we do different things? How do we reach out? That type of thing. So I'm assuming it's more of mechanisms, lessons learned from how the process went, or where there might be improvements. So that's what I would assume it would be.
Okay, with that in mind, would anybody like to make a motion to approve?
I had an motion to approve.
Okay, yeah.
I'll second it. Jake Neese, here in county.
And all those in favor, do we need to do that?
Yeah. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, so next up, we have a series of glass industry presenters. So yesterday, we all toured, the advisory board toured a few key facilities that are critical in the glass loop of Colorado, but there wasn't enough time in one day to see or hear from all of the key players. So today we have the pleasure of hearing from some of those key players that are essential to circularity of glass. We will hear from a glass generator, a glass educator and service provider, and we will hear from the transportation sector, a recycled glass end market, a manufacturer, and a glass trade association. So we have a great lineup, and we will kick it off with Sarah Jones from Steamboat Ski Resort. Go ahead, Sarah.
Good morning, Sarah Jones, Director of Social Responsibility for the Steamboat Ski Area. Thanks for having me today. And I thought it's always good to provide context. The resorts are a pretty unique business. And so I want to kind of provide some statistics to really understand our business. So we are a resort. We have 3,741 acres of skiable terrain, 23 lifts, and 182 trails. About 80% of our terrain is leased from the U.S. Forest Service. We also on mountain have 7 restaurants and a food hall. We manage a hotel and full conference and event services. And we have 6 rental retail locations. To give you a sense of some of our equipment that we have, not talking about our full fleet, but just for on mountain, we have 34 snowcats and 74 snowmobiles. So as you can imagine, it's a really unique business and lots of things to be thinking about when we think about waste. We are, of course, 180 miles from the Front Range, which makes things unique. And of our restaurants, 4 of those are on mountain and accessed either by a gondola or by snowcats. So again, thinking about the complexity of the business and waste diversion. In 2023, we had 776 tons of waste. 25% of that was diverted, so recycled. And I estimated that about 116 tons of that was glass. As you can imagine, when we think about waste from our mountain, everything has to be hauled up in a gondola or cat, and then it has to all the waste is then hauled down. So really quite complicated to think about all of those things. And what we have done, kind of the first steps that we have done in this space to divert, one, at all of our food outlets, we have moved to reusable. So all of our utensils, all of our plates, we do have water stations in all of our lodges and restaurants, and we provide cups, reusable cups for that. And we encourage people to bring or purchase reusable pouches that they can fill at those water stations. They also get a discount for our fountain drinks using those. We also have really focused what we collect for recycling to those that we know have a good end market. So even though we generate all kinds of waste, what we focus on recycling is corrugated cardboard, glass, and aluminum. Along those lines, we have banned all single-use plastics for drinking on mountain as well. So at a resort, Coca-Cola is our partner, and we do not purchase any single-use plastic drinking containers. When we think about how we're going to address glass, and I think I wanted to kind of highlight, as I mentioned, the difficulty of the weight and the transport of recycling and trash, and glass being so heavy with the potential of contamination and breakage. That's something that we think a lot about. So one of the things that we've been thinking about and understanding that this is probably not the best reuse for that glass or the best recycling of that glass. One idea we have that we're working on is for all of our on-mountain glass collection to actually crush that glass and use it on mountain. So whether that's as a sand, as a soil amendment for a lot of the work that we do in the summer. But that's just something that we've been thinking about to try to reduce the amount of transport of that heavy material. That's just kind of an overview. Obviously, we have a lot in our resort operations that we think about as it relates to waste. We are also, we do have compost for those restaurants in our base area. We're trying to figure out the next best step for addressing compost on mountain. We have been in initial discussions with the Forest Service on having an on-mountain in-vessel composter, but as you may or may not be aware, working with the U.S. Forest Service and the regulations are quite strict, and we have to really be conscious of environmental impacts, visual impacts when we work with the U.S. Forest Service. So anything that would be composting on mountain, we'd have to be very careful and thoughtful about. So that's another thing that we're working with the Forest Service on. I'm happy to answer any questions. I can't remember whether we're waiting to the end for questions, but if there are any clarifying questions, I'm happy to answer those now.
Thanks very much, Sarah. We do have questions saved for the end.
Great, thank you.
Great. Next up, we have Deb Adams from High Country Recycling. Thanks, Deb.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I don't do video because I always freeze up. And do you have my slides?
Yes.
Okay, so we are High Country Recycling, and I'm going to tell you how glass recycling came to Custer County, Colorado. So could you go to my slideshow? There we go. Next slide. So Custer County is considered a frontier county, meaning we have less than 6 people per square mile. We're nestled in the Wet Mountain Valley between the Wet Mountains and the Sangre de Cristo Range. A round trip drive to the nearest towns of either Pueblo, Salida, Canyon City, or Walsenburg averages 3 hours, depending upon your speed, of course. The year-round population is 5,100, which doubles from May to October when second home property owners return each year. Next slide. So our story of Custer County Recycles. In late 2020, all free existing recycling services abruptly ceased, except for the county-owned and operated cardboard recycling service. Contracts were breached with the county and the 2 adjacent towns of Westcliff and Silvercliff, the county's center. In 2021, High Country Recycling and Custer County partnered and successfully received an RREO grant, which funded the construction of a Custer County MRF, the purchase of a new multi-purpose baler, and a new personnel position. Next slide. So this is a photo of the Joni Liebman Recycling Center. Joni Liebman is our champion when it comes to recycling in Custer County, and this recycling center opened in 2022. The facility has 5 drop-off windows to collect mixed paper, steel cans, and aluminum. And you can see the cages on the lower left. The beauty of those cages is that they are on heavy-duty wheels, and they get wheeled over to the baler, and then the gate opens up and they just drop everything into the baler. Corrugated cardboard is collected inside the door. The bale barn on the right stores the bales of cardboard, aluminum, and steel. So that's where we collect everything until we have enough for a pickup or delivery. And the cargo containers of the bale barn are the walls of the building, and they store mixed paper, protecting it from the elements of Colorado. Next slide. So in July 2022, all the 2020 recycling services that we had returned except for glass due to lack of funds for machinery, personnel, and outdoor protected slab and location. In October 2023, 3 HCR board members attended the annual Recycle Colorado board meeting in Salida, Colorado, and met Celine of Glass to Glass. From there, we activated a campaign in December 2023. We have the Wet Mountain Valley Community Foundation Spirit Campaign every year. Next slide, please. So we did an ad campaign for the month of December. This was a 1/4-page ad in our local paper, the Wet Mountain Tribune, and it was very effective. In 2022, our Spirit campaign contributions totaled $6,951, and the ask for contributions for glass went up to $14,106 in 2023, which indicated to us that the community was very interested in recycling glass. Next slide. We also had a press release. We did social media. KLZR, our local radio station, did a lot of promotion. So we were very proactive, looking for the funds to be able to recycle glass. Next slide. And so on February 9th, 2024, glass recycling returned to Westcliff, Colorado through a contract between High Country Recycling and Glass to Glass. Next slide. And once again, we definitely put ourselves out there, letting people know what we are doing. So this was front page news about glass recycling coming back to Custer County. Next slide. And this is our Big Blue. That's what we called it. It is conveniently located 24/7 in town at the Altitude Community Fitness parking lot, who donated the space for glass recycling. This location is very convenient to the restaurants that are all in town, and also for people. And so this is the only glass recycling facility that we have. Next slide. And on Big Blue, there is the sign about acceptable glass. There's also a sign to let people know about no lids, no caps, no corks. We also discovered that it was important to use both sides of Big Blue. And some people read and some people don't. So we do have the occasional thing that doesn't belong in there. And then the next slide is going to show you what Big Blue looks like. That was taken last week, and this is less than 3 weeks. And what we have discovered about Big Blue and just glass recycling, one, a lot of people drink beer in Custer County, and the glass must be raked on a regular basis to push the mountains by the windows into the valleys. So we have volunteers to do that. And then the next slide, so this just came on board in February, and we created this chart that's letting us know when it gets picked up, what the tonnage is. And you will see that glass recycling is not cheap. We are fortunate that we did raise the funds in the Spirit campaign, and we do have enough funds to get through the year. We also foolishly thought that glass pickup would be every 6 weeks. And during our off season, like now we're in the season, but even during the off season, it was every 4 weeks. And that will probably be the trend, if not every 3 weeks. But we can have up to 5 tons of glass. So we do pay very close attention to the level of glass, because like the previous speaker said, glass is very heavy. We have also given all our liquor licensed restaurants a Slim Jim for them to collect the glass. Some restaurants are a little bit more responsible than others, but we feel it will take some time for everyone to get fully on board with glass recycling. Next slide. We have a brochure that is out in the community, and you can see that we have the photo of Big Blue. We also have our other satellite recycling collection drop-offs. Keep in mind that we are very rural. So besides the recycling center, there are 2 drop-off points that collect cardboard, mixed paper, aluminum, and steel cans. So this is one side of our brochure, and the next slide shows the other side of the brochure. And you can see that we have glass, we tell people what to do, and we just let everyone know how we can have waste diversion. Sadly, we do have a percentage of the community that just refuses to recycle anything, but there's nothing we can do about that. Next slide, please. So this glass recycling in Big Blue is up to you. This will be a magnet that will go on Big Blue so people know that glass is fully funded by community contributions. And then we have a little promo that if everyone gave us $20. They get a High Country Recycling water bottle. Next slide. This is just some of the continuation of the promotion of High Country Recycling and glass recycling. So the Wet Mountain Valley Community Foundation had this nonprofit spotlight in their quarterly newsletter, and then Make Recycling Second Nature is an ad, another quarter-page ad that is going in the Summer in the Valley supplement, which is a newspaper supplement that is around all summer. Next slide. So we ask, what is the future of Big Blue, and will we be able to sustain glass recycling program? Only time will tell. Next slide. But in the meantime, I just wanted to throw this in, another thing that we're doing with recycling. We created the trailer art project. So these are the trailers that are at the recycling drop-off points. We have 2 of them. And as you can see, they are in all different levels of age. And so we have 13 trailers, and we started this project. Next slide, please. And we got the high school kids engaged in the Future Farmers of America class. They first signed up to sand all 13 trailers. We provided them with the equipment, and then you can see on the right what a trailer ends up looking like. And so this class took on the sanding, the repairing, the welding, and painting blue of the trailers. At this time, we have 7 trailers painted blue. Next slide. And then this is what they're turning into. So over the past weekend, we had 3 trailers painted. This was done at the Custer County Kids Council Family Fun Day, where we painted the hand of anyone who came by. They got to pick the color, and then they imprinted their print on the trailer. This particular trailer is specific for collecting cardboard. And then we also wrote their name underneath their handprint. And then the next slide. We also had 2 artists. So you can see what the trailers look like on the left. The trailer in the middle was painted by a group of adults who came together, and then finished with the artist Kim Townsend, who is the artistic director of this project. And then we had a visiting artist who just graduated from art school in Pasadena, and she created the trailer with the dragons yet to be named. Next slide. And this is where they went. So this is the recycling collection trailers at a drop-off site in Silver Cliff, and the first 3 trailers painted in the trailer art project. It's gotten a lot of buzz. People have been very happy. It's bringing more attention to recycling. And we hope that with the handprints and the dragons, that people will want to go and visit the trailers when they do their recycling. And the next slide, which I think is the end. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Deb. And now our next speaker will be Laurie Johnson from Circular Economy Development Center. Thanks, Laurie.
Great, thanks so much. Hi, everybody. Good to see some of you again since yesterday. Laurie Johnson, founder and CEO of Circular Colorado. We are the nonprofit contracted with the state to create, which we have completed, and administer the Circular Economy Development Center. Today, I'm going to talk to you about our transload project, and I'll try to make it specific to glass. This presentation was actually designed for the proposal to the Front Range Waste Diversion Board, but I'm going to use it to kind of explain the project to you. So next slide. Perfect. Here's a summary. No need to read the whole thing. What the CEDC, the Circular Economy Development Center, does, I like to say that we're either the quarterback if you like sports, or the nucleus if you like science. You've probably heard that from me before. We bring partners together in collaborative projects to work on either recycling, manufacturing, or transportation. I spend probably about half my time on transport. As many of you know, that's one of the biggest hurdles in recycling, and especially with something like glass, which is really heavy and breaks and causes all types of issues for folks when they're trying to collect it. So next slide. So what we do, for example, is our first big project that is about to roll out here is this Front Range Transload located in Pueblo. We brought together partners, the Front Range Transload, which is actually run by B. Kirkland Trucking. They're a local trucking company in Colorado Springs that has about 45 tractor trailers, all types of Class A vehicles. They transport all over the state. We partnered with Recycle Colorado for some outreach to cities and towns all throughout Colorado. And then our collaborators, we brought together a broker, Centennial Recycling, to help us qualify material, Direct Polymers, a plastics recycler, to help us on a lot of the plastics to keep it local. City and County of Pueblo, the Pueblo Economic Development Department, and very importantly, BNSF, the railroad. Next slide. Transportation challenges, I don't have to probably teach you guys this. So we know what happens with transportation, whether it's for glass or any types of recyclable materials. And so our goal was to try to bridge that gap. Not only initially along the Front Range, but really statewide. So if you would, whoever's doing the slide, skip to slide 8, that would be really helpful. So I'll take you guys through all of these. Keep going. Keep to number 8. It's a map of routes.
Perfect, thank you.
Keep going. There we go. That's the one. So let me explain to you what the transload is. It's a site in Pueblo. It's on BNSF land. B. Kirkland Trucking leases that land, including a 8,000 square foot building at 6 acres, with obviously direct access to rail, 100 plus cars a month. And what we do there, we also are going to create a commercial drop site there for businesses to drop recyclables at no charge. That's something that the Pueblo community can use, and surrounding communities. Anyone is going to be free to access that drop site. So that.
Hey, Lori, sorry to interrupt you, but it seems that people are on the call are having a little trouble with your audio. I'm not sure if you can speak closer to the mic or if you have headphones, but we can try to troubleshoot a few things.
Okay. Is it going in and out, or is it just not loud enough?
I think it may just not be loud enough.
Okay, is that better? I hear her just fine. Okay, thanks, Deb. Well, I will keep going. I'll try to speak more loudly. So the transload is meant to collect recyclables throughout the state in all different ways. So you could actually look at this as an LTL solution. We can collect all types of loads. We can collect it from anywhere. You don't need to have a dock. You don't need to have a baler. We will collect material that is baled. We'll collect it in super sacks. We'll collect it in gaylords. So whatever you can get it in that can be transported, we can transport multiple materials on one load. So the idea is the truck leaves Pueblo, it goes out full, because for carbon reasons, of course, we're not going to haul empty. It goes out with lumber, retail products, you name it, to sites all throughout the state. And then it comes back making stops all the way back to Pueblo, picking up recyclables. The beauty of this is that we can collect, like I said, multiple materials. We can have plastics, fiber, aluminum, glass, all of that on one load, bring it back to the transload, offload it, aggregate it, store it until we have full, preferably rail car fulls to go to market. And more preferable than that is to go to market in Colorado. We also can just take it by truck to wherever it needs to go. One example we have for plastics, we have a company called Driven Plastics in Pueblo. So we're collecting film that is not B-level film, so it's dirty, has not been getting recycled, and it'll go straight to them for their product, which goes into asphalt, as an example. So the goal is to collect material that has not been being collected, mostly because they don't have full truckloads. And if they don't have full truckloads, they can't store the material at length to have enough to go to market. Next slide. Let's see what I have on that one.
Sorry, Lori, we're having a little bit of trouble with our in-home, in-room stuff. So I'm not sure it will let us, it's trying to turn back on the computer. So unfortunately, I can't advance your slides right now. We have a blank TV, but
Oh,
I
you have
am.
blank TV, so you can't even see my slides. Is that the case? Okay.
Oh, no, I can see, yeah, it says my
Oh,
screen.
because I could share my screen real quick, because this next one's kind of
That's
important.
problem.
Just give me 1 second. I'm just trying to fix a few things going on
Okay.
with our,
I can
yeah.
just chat, I can chatter on until you're ready. How's that?
Thank you.
So this solution, let's now talk about glass. So as we know, glass is heavy, glass is hard to transport, as far as hauling goes and mixing it with other recyclables. So there is another transload. It is located to the east of Grand Junction. It's large, it has silos. So it would need a glass crusher. But what the CEDC does is works to maximize this transportation, and especially using rail. So most of you probably know, for 1 ton of material, rail gets about 350 miles to a diesel gallon, while a truck gets, as we know, a lot less than that, like around 10 or so, like 10 or so. So we are working to see how much we can utilize rail. Lucky enough, BNSF is on board and working with us. We're trying to see if we can get rates that are complementary to interstate trucking. For rail, typically you don't use rail on short runs, at least the bigger providers like UP and BNSF, and then you use smaller rail companies for kind of what I call the last mile. So that's what we're working to do on glass. And how are you doing with your presentation there?
Unfortunately, not as great as I'd like to be.
Okay. All right. Well, let me just finish up. I mean, you get the concept. So let me just finish up by telling you what the CEDC does. We're here to create minimum of 3 full circular economy soup to nuts in the next 4 years. That'll be the remainder of the contract. We do everything from site selection, help with grant funds, financial analysis, land use, environmental health and safety, helping with compliance and permits. But most importantly, we bring together collaborators. We architect the solution. So that's what we did here with the Front Range Transload. And then we help CDPHE with some oversight as far as operations goes. We're out there fully vetting these technologies, these solutions, these projects. That becomes very important when you start talking about technology, especially for other materials besides glass that are using different chemicals and processes that we want to make sure that we keep the public in Colorado safe. So I will leave it at that, and we'll wait for questions at the end since we can't finish up the slides. Happy to share any stuff after this if you want to see a layout of the transload or have more questions for future.
Thanks so much, Lori. Yeah, sorry, we're having some technical difficulties in the room. So I'm trying to fix, we may take just a brief pause before we switch to the next presenter, just so I can try to figure out what's going on.
And Laurie will share your slides with the group as well.
Sorry, just Caroline, City of Fort Collins. I wonder, since it seems like the Zoom call is doing okay, I don't know if the presenters are able to share their slides so that we're not only dependent on one computer that might be having issues, just to not feel so much pressure on figure that out.
Yeah. Well, do you want to try to share yours? I go the slides.
There's not a lot of computers in the room that we could probably have.
Yeah, I think Wolf is gonna.
I have it going on mine.
No.
I didn't get an invite to.
We have a Zoom, we have a separate Zoom. Yeah, like the usual meetings.
Yeah, just give us 1 second. We're attempting to share. Yeah, everyone, I think we are going to switch up the agenda a little bit, and we are just going to take our 5-minute break now. So on my computer, I have 9:16. We'll come back together at 9:21. I am, for those on the call representing the public that are interested in providing public comment during that period, I am going to open up the chat so that you can chat with hosts and panelists. If you are looking to provide public comment, feel free to send your name, affiliation, and say that you would like to provide public comment to the host and panelists. And we will make sure that we get you on the agenda. I will keep the chat open well past the 5-minute break, but we will just address some of our hybrid technical difficulties right now.
And we'll continue with Patrick after the 5-minute break. Patrick, if you are on the call now. Thank you.
You wanted to say and finish your slides?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. We are going to get started again. You all should be able on the virtual side of things to be able to see recycled glass in insulation presentation. Will someone just give me a thumbs up? Just want to make sure. Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. Okay. Yeah,
right.
Megan, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks everyone for your patience. So next we have Patrick Haller from Owens Corning. Patrick, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Patrick Haller. I'm the sustainability director for our insulation business on the marketing side at Owens Corning. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the demand side kind of question for recycled glass. So if you flip to the next slide, just really briefly about our business. It's a large, diversified global insulation business. But our focus is still really on fiberglass. It's kind of our legacy product. It's still the biggest product in the market and in our platform. You've probably seen the pink fiberglass insulation in a variety of places, particularly in residential applications. You can go ahead and flip to the next slide real quick, please. So just going through the background quickly to get to the recycling piece. And like I said, glass fiber is a big part of our portfolio. We essentially melt either raw materials or glass cullet into fibers and then add some different chemicals or post-processing or facers and things like that that make it easier to apply in applications. But I think for me, the most important part about the sustainability of our products, really there's three things. I mean, on the glass side, one, glass is a pretty safe material. It's pretty limited amounts of added chemicals and anything else like that to it. Two, glass is, while not quite renewable, there are quite a bit of both raw materials out there for it and also a decent recycled input stream that we can use pretty cost effectively in our glass. And I think the third important thing here is really just the lifetime value of insulation. It depends a lot on the climate and where the insulation's applied, but you get a really good return on energy inputs as well anytime it comes to insulation. So I think it's a product that can really help us globally in reducing our energy. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. I think the big point here, I already alluded a little bit to the applications, but the main one's residential. That's where you've probably seen it before, but it's also in any commercial building that you've ever been in as well. And so it's a large building footprint and also a large energy footprint that our products cover. We can go ahead and go to the next one. This is where I think it gets really interesting from a recycled content standpoint. So just focusing on the middle column, you can see some of the recycled glass opportunities sitting there. And I think the stat at the bottom is really telling. We use well over 1 billion pounds a year of recycled glass. And we're not the only ones in our industry that use it either. I think we're the biggest user. And it really helps our product footprint. It helps our sustainability. It's a marketing claim that matters to our customers. And operationally, it's also a really good use of recycled materials. It's not a situation where we sacrifice quality or add a bunch of cost in order to use these materials, provided that we can get the supply. We'd really like to maximize our use of this. It's not a niche opportunity. It's not a loss leader. It's truly valuable at every step through the chain. So anything we can do to increase the supply of glass into the recycled glass market, we want to do, because we can use as much as we can get the way things are situated right now. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So, a few more detailed points about glass recycling here. We know that the recycling rate is low in the US relative, particularly to the areas of Europe where we operate. And so that means there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity on the supply side that we know is actionable, because if 33% of glass containers are recycled, why not more? Why not 100%? And it actually really makes our operations difficult, that the supply can be kind of up and down. So like I said, we like to use it, but we have to make decisions that affect everything from our capital equipment to our marketing claims that operate on a long term. So when there is a risk of inconsistent supply, we sometimes have to decide not to use recycled materials because if we can't get it again next year, it doesn't make sense to put the pieces in place to use it this year. There are also benefits I mentioned more broadly than our products, right? So diverting waste to landfill is a big one. We have a commitment to reduce our own waste to landfill to 0 by 2030, which is a big deal because we are a pretty big company and generate a fair amount of waste. But anything we can do to expand that out into the broader ecosystem, whether it's consumers or other businesses, et cetera, helps meet essentially our broader sustainability ambitions as well. It also helps with our energy consumption. So I mentioned that it's economic for us in our particular operations. And part of that is that it actually takes less energy to melt recycled glass than it does to go from virgin raw materials. And so there is an added sustainability and cost benefit, which make this an attractive business model for us, which is part of why it's been able to scale so far. And the last comment there on jobs is, it really helps at a number of places in the value chain. There are obviously jobs every step of the way from material collection through sorting, reprocessing, and sending it back to us, as well as the jobs that it supports in manufacturing and downstream of our products. So anything that we can do to continue to improve and grow this value chain is beneficial for jobs as well. I think I've got one more slide. Yeah. So last one here, and I won't go into detail, but the point is we need help on this. We're not going to be the ones to drive the supply side, but we need it. And so, we've looked at a couple different models, and the best that we can identify is a curbside collection with a partnership with an MRF. So that gives us access to a clean, pretty reliable supply, and it can be economic to everybody in the system. We do like bottle bills. The challenge there is just getting them across the line. Obviously, that requires a lot of people to be on the same page, and it can be hard to advance those kind of initiatives quickly, but they do make a difference once they're there. And then the last option is the community collection sites. So good as a last resort, but I think we all know that it's a lot to expect of people, right? To take an extra trip, to keep an extra bin, to think about it. And so even in the best case scenario, you don't get particularly high recycling rates with community collection, which is why we've kind of pointed to that as a last resort option. So I will end there, but will remind you of the main point, which is we use over 1 billion pounds a year and we could use more. So the demand side of the equation, I think, is pretty healthy when it comes to increasing glass recycling.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Appreciate your time. And if you do have time, we will have some questions after our next two speakers.
Yep, I'll be here.
Thanks. So our next speaker is going to provide a manufacturer and producer perspective, and it is Beth Conray from Beth's Bees. Thanks, Beth.
You're welcome. Good morning. Next slide, I guess. Oh, that's me. Okay, so go ahead, next one after that. All right, so my name's Beth, and I own B Squared Apiaries. We are based in Berthoud, Colorado. We run about 200 colonies of bees from Denver to Wellington. And a little bit about our company is that we are a certified bee corporation, donating over 20,000 to nonprofits in 2023. Member 1% for the planet. I own it, and we're solar powered. Next, probably more glass right there. We have 4 Good Food Awards, and if you're not familiar with Good Food Awards, you should be. They recognize the value of both the finished product as well as the manner in which we manage our bees, and we're exceptionally proud of all of these. I just got back from Portland on this sea salt caramel, and then we are plastic neutral certified by Repurpose Global. And the only reason I put that on there is because we have to buy an offset to justify our plastic use. We would prefer not to if there's something available on the market. So let's go ahead and look at the next slide. We package in both glass and plastic. We started out using only glass. And because it was in a square jar, and with a name like B Squared, we would like a square jar. So that made imminent sense to us to have glass in it. They fit great on retail store shelves. There's no loss of space on a retail shelf with a square glass, and they are fully recyclable and reusable. And we do have a recycling statement on our website on how we manage our recyclables. And the glass, we encourage our users to recycle the glass. I have no idea, as the gentleman in front of me was saying, how those encouragements work at the consumer level, but we do encourage them to do that, and we prefer glass. We absolutely do. Next. So we have all these plastics that have come into being as well. I should note that this is just the retail plastic list. We do a tremendous amount of sales institutional food distribution. And one of the issues that we've got is that there's no glass allowed in a commercial kitchen. And so we cannot not package in plastic because of that regulation. It is also in response to consumer requests. So you can't squeeze a glass jar, is what it came down to. Also, when it comes down to shipping, most of the stuff's flat rate, but if you're not on a flat rate, then the weight of glass, of course, is substantial compared to the weight of plastic. And then people worry about it breaking, both in the shipping process as well as in the traveling process. A lot of people, grab a jar of local honey on their way up to Estes Park or whatever, and they don't want it jiggling around their RV and breaking. So that's why they want the plastic. But we do have to offset this plastic purchasing with this company called Repurpose Global, who's not the only one in the industry doing that. And I have to do this giant spreadsheet quarterly to tell them what all of my plastic usage is, from lids to containers, to cone containers, to pollen containers. Everything has to be accounted for, and then they send me back a bill. And I think it makes me feel a lot better about having to offer plastic, but it's not a very good solution compared to reducing plastic, which is what I would really like to do. And of course, we all know the planetary impact of nanoplastics, microplastics, plastics. So to the next slide. So my thoughts are that I would prefer a greener glass. At least a partial recycled glass content. We are a much smaller company than Owens Corning, but if you added us all up, we could make a big difference if something like that was available. I did take the opportunity to check in with both of my glass suppliers, and neither one of them is currently using any recycled glass content in their bottles, and that would be Tricor Brown, and the other one is Specialty Bottle. So we would prefer not to use plastic at all if we could, but if we want some of the features that come with plastic, i.e. squeezability and weight, then we need some other material out there to replace plastics features. And I know that that's not in the glass realm probably, but it's certainly something that would be of interest to us from the consumer packaging side. Thank you.
Much, Beth, for your presentation and those thoughts. We've got our final speaker here, and then we'll open up for Q&A. And so our final speaker is from a trade association, from Glass Recycling Coalition. We've got Sarah Nichols.
Cool. Hi, thanks everyone. My name is Sarah. I am a consultant with Resource Recycling Systems, or RRS, and we are the managing consultancy for the Glass Recycling Coalition and the Glass Recycling Foundation, which are two resources that I will talk about today for you all to take advantage of when working on glass recycling programs. The first thing that I'll talk about is the Glass Recycling Coalition. This is a non-competitive, member-driven coalition, so a volunteer coalition. with the mission to break down barriers and build opportunities for glass as a core recyclable. The GRC does a number of different things. I'll talk about one or two of those in more detail in a minute, but some of the activities of the Glass Recycling Coalition include education, industry collaboration through events, resources, etc. So that bottom right-hand picture that you see is a group of volunteers from the GRC speaking on a panel at Waste Expo. So just one of the many industry events that the GRC is trying to bring education and information to. And of course, yours truly, Scott DeFife, is in the middle of that in your room as well. He's a big piece of the leadership committee on the GRC. They provide a lot of networking opportunities through biannual meetings. So typically the GRC is going to have one virtual meeting and one in-person meeting per year. What I'll talk about mostly on this call is how the GRC supports quality of material through the MRF certification program. They also provide grant review and technical assistance for the Glass Recycling Foundation. And then every couple to every few years, the GRC also surveys public entities and the glass recycling industry to conduct the glass recycling survey and just put out more information for you all to have on hand to make more educated decisions. Okay, so what I'm going to spend most of the time talking about is a resource for both communities and for MRFs in Colorado and beyond, which is the MRF certification program. We all probably know that glass and single stream can be a challenge. It is abrasive, it breaks a lot. It is can be difficult and expensive to process. It can be hard on equipment at MRFs. And then more so when glass is included in single stream, while we get the volume that we need, we don't often get the quality that we need. So the MRF certification program is really focusing on the quality that's coming out of the MRF. As you all know, most glass that comes out of MRF, or all glass that comes out of MRF, is going to need to be processed at a secondary processing facility. So that just adds another step in the quest for quality. And as a result, a large amount of curbside glass is sent to landfill because it isn't high quality. That embedded energy is lost, and that means that a lot of the communities are not necessarily hitting their diversion goals, and MRFs are paying additional money to reroute that glass back to the landfill. I like the financial figure on the right. This shows that MRF upgrades can really be, anywhere from adding one piece of equipment to try to get better quality, so kind of a small scale investment, all things considered, $2 million, multi-million-dollar retrofits of existing MRFs, and obviously new MRFs are going to be focused on putting in the highest quality equipment to try to get good quality material. And this investment does pay for itself over time, both financially and with the MRF's ability to contract and utilize more communities' materials. This slide just shows some examples of glass cleaning equipment. So there are a number of different options out there, really intended to show that the option for each MRF might be different as far as what those glass cleanup systems might look like, really depending on existing infrastructure at the MRF and in markets for that material as well. And that'll dictate what that cleanup system looks like in a MRF. Okay, so the Glass Recycling Coalition does have a free program for MRFs. This is meant to incentivize and reward MRFs that are producing high quality glass cullet by awarding a bronze, silver, or gold certification for the MRFs. This was started in 2019, and any MRF that's accepting glass can apply. Obviously, if they're producing good quality glass, we want them to be applying. If they're not producing good quality glass, we want to encourage them to invest in their facility so that they can produce better quality glass, hopefully have stronger contracts with communities, and eventually get certified. Applicants are judged on a number of different items, including the current infrastructure at the MRF in markets for that glass, and the glass purity itself. So the committee is going to be looking at the breakdown of +3/8 material, -3/8 material, or fines, and non-glass residue. All of that's coming out of the back end of the MRF and being shipped to secondary processing. Applications are scored by an independent scoring committee. So the GRC does have a technical advisory committee that's scoring those applications. And then the MRF is going to receive if they receive certification, it will be a bronze, silver, or gold certification. Once certified, MRFs receive a number of things from the GRC to help get the word out about their certification. So one thing is their certificate. We ask them typically to take a picture in their MRF so that we can utilize it for public outreach and social media. We do website recognition for them. We do industry media promotion. So anytime that a MRF does get certified, we send that out to all of the trade publications, put it on the GRC website, etc. They are highlighted on the GRC's infrastructure map, which is another great resource for you all to check out. We do case studies, all sorts of things. One thing that I want to mention is that the MRF certification can be very valuable to the MRFs when bidding on municipal contracts. So for communities who are looking to increase diversion rates, include glass as part of that, having a MRF that is certified can put that MRF ahead of other MRFs when it comes down to competition. Some other resources from the Glass Recycling Coalition. I do encourage you all to go to glassrecycles.org and take a look at all of the resources that the GRC has on there, including case studies, guides for you all, calculators, all sorts of fun stuff. And the last thing that I will mention as another resource for you all is the Glass Recycling Foundation. This is a 501c3 that was kind of born out of the Glass Recycling Coalition and its need to fill infrastructure gaps by committing funding to local governments and nonprofits who are helping to get more glass recycled. The GRF does fund two different kinds of projects: infrastructure projects and education projects. And the eligible entities include local governments, so municipalities, counties, solid waste districts, etc., and then nonprofits as well. There is a grant application open currently for the Glass Recycling Foundation. So if you are interested in applying for a grant for new containers or facility upgrades or whatever it might be, check out glassrecyclingfoundation.org. Or you can just shoot me an email and we can chat more about what that looks like for your community or your nonprofit. And I think that is it. There is my contact information.
Great, thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much to all of the speakers. Now I'd like to open up to board members for any questions or comments from any of the presentations. Go ahead, Rick.
Rick Cater, MRFs, Boulder County. I wanted to ask the gentleman that was representing fiberglass whether or not he is aware of any MRFs that currently are able to make a fiberglass spec. And if so, can they tell us where that is so we could visit with them? And then the second question is, is fiberglass considered a best and highest use? Or is bottle to bottle the best and highest use? So how would you view, should we be trying to improve our plants to get to a fiberglass spec? Is that the holy grail? So just wondering what you thought on that.
Yeah, so those are good questions, and I don't actually have good answers for that. Let me, if it's okay with you, I'll put my email address in the chat, and maybe you can send me the questions, and then I need to get in touch with our sourcing people. They know the specs an order of magnitude better than I do, and might be able to point you to some specific examples too. In terms of best use, I don't actually know the answer to that one either. I would hypothesize that, or I would, I guess, make the argument that fiberglass is a best use, because it's a long-term use material. It reduces energy usage, those kind of things, instead of being, again, another more of a single use kind of material. But that's something I can put you in touch with one of our corporate sustainability experts who would better be equipped to answer that question. So
Thanks, Patrick.
I have a follow-up.
Yep.
Liz Chapman from Recycle Colorado, following up on Rick's question. Is there enough potential glass to feed both the manufacturing of glass containers and the use of recycled glass for fiberglass? Or do those systems compete for the same glass?
Can I hop in?
Sarah, Scott Five with glass packaging. I think Sarah can answer that question, but I can too, and I can also answer Rick's.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, it's a little bit of a catch-22 when it comes to demand for more glass. I would say yes, across the board, your end markets want more cullet, but it has to be high quality material. So that's where some of the supply and demand kind of challenges come into play, because a lot of the material that is coming out of communities is just not high quality enough to either be processed or to make it to an end market. But I would say by and large, the end markets do want more glass.
Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado, thank you. That did not answer my question.
Scott Five Glass Packaging Institute. Let me try to answer both questions. Yes, there's enough glass to feed all the end markets that want it. Right now, nationally, we're only recycling about 1/3 of the glass that's in the economy. The other 2/3 is ending up in landfills, either directly or tries to get recycled, but still ends up in landfills. So the demand you could double the demand from the fiberglass industry and double the demand from the glass container industry and still landfill half the glass in the country rather than 2/3 of the glass in the country. So there's enough glass in the economy to feed both the things. They don't need to compete. To the fiberglass question, without representing fiberglass, but doing what I do and leading the recycling coalition and the foundation, your MRF can't make a fiberglass, something that the fiberglass industry can take directly. They have to clean it the same way that it's going in a furnace. The fiberglass industry requires a furnace. If it's going in a furnace, it has to meet a cullet spec. Their cullet spec is a little bit different than the glass container cullet spec in that they don't need as much color separation, and they can take the smaller mids and fines more than the glass container plant can, because it needs more color separation. Therefore, the cullet has to, you saw the cullet is bigger when it goes to, because it needs to go through the optical sorter to make sure that we're getting the right color in. And so typically from a glass processing facility like Glass to Glass or Strategic Materials or any of the other plants around the country that have a glass processing facility, they're feeding both the end markets. All the glass comes in. The cullet that can go to a bottle plant is going to the bottle plant. But what can go, like you saw in Broomfield yesterday, what can go to fiberglass can go to fiberglass. That's why John Lair from Momentum was doing both, and he was feeding his primary end market in Utah is fiberglass.
Okay.
Right. So those two things can work together and typically work together regionally. Every once in a while, when there's so little glass available and there's multiple fiberglass plants and multiple glass container plants, like in Georgia and Indiana, you've got the end markets fighting for the glass. But it's because of a limit of supply, not the fact that there's not enough in the economy.
May I follow up?
Yeah, yeah.
So what
Did
if,
that, and also did that answer your, okay, thanks.
so if, so we might, if you didn't answer the question on whether or not 30-year life in a form of, in the form of insulation is a higher use than a bottle to bottle use. How, so
Most of the environmental groups that, I'm not involved in these decisions, but in most of the environmental groups, NERC, CERTIC, when it existed, several of the other recycling have determined that back into bottle is the highest best use. Reduce, reuse, recycle, repurpose, all that sort of things. I'm not suggesting that fiberglass is not a positive end market. It is a positive end market. I would say that fiberglass is better than roadbed or filtration or something like that. But back into a new bottle is typically by most of the environmentally sustainable groups determined to be the top of the glass hierarchy for recycling.
And I think you just have to use a mindset, Jake needs here at County, that think about, like, take it to infinity. That fiberglass will be used for 30, 50, 100 years, but it will ultimately end up in the landfill. Where in theory, bottle glass can be recycled truly infinitely. So while fiberglass is a good use, it will reduce energy consumption in the long term. You're thinking about the true circular economy, like take it to infinity.
I was thinking maybe a MRF would want to go, how do I partner with glass to glass systems in my plant that get you closer to that high valued product, and then cut a deal with Momentum, I mean glass to glass, to move our tons to that highest use, you know, that kind of thing, so that we could kind of move to a highest use kind of process.
Can we continue with that? Are we okay to?
Yes, we just have a couple more minutes.
Okay.
Oh, there are other
And
questions.
if there are other questions for the other, because I have two questions for presenters, but.
Okay, well, perhaps we could pick this conversation up and go through some other questions. Yeah, Clinton?
Yeah, Clinton Sander, A1 Organics, and my question's for Sarah Jones. You still with us?
Yes.
Yes. Hey, so Sarah, I often praise Steamboat Springs Resort for their ability to manage contamination at the point of collection with your bins by having team members actually sorting the material coming up to the bin versus the guest to put it into the can. So could you speak to that on the level of contamination reduction that it provides, even if it's within the organics or within the recycling?
Sure. So, yeah, we have kind of, to reduce contamination, we have a couple strategies. One is for guests facing, especially in the base area. We're very clear, we're focused on aluminum. So we have that, and then we do our base area services. That's the team that collects all of the waste. They actually go through, they sort it to reduce contamination. So that's one piece of the work that we do. For composting, we are only currently collecting back of house, and that's how we have not yet brought it to front of house, because as many mountain communities understand, staffing is always a struggle. So by keeping it back of house, we know we can eliminate contamination in that space. We also, on mountain at all of our lodges, we instead of having recycle stations, we have where everybody brings their waste. We have waste stations where everybody brings their waste, and then we have sorters who go through and take out the recycling to make sure they're reducing the contamination. So those are some of the strategies that we've used. We understand that guests are on vacation and they do not want to be recycling, or they don't want to be thinking about recycling. We also recognize that they're coming from different states, different countries, and so what they think is recyclable may be different than we actually are recycling. So that's another piece of the work that we're doing to reduce contamination.
Okay, and just a follow-up question. Okay, I'm sorry. I just think this is really important for everybody to gather in the room. Do you find by reducing the amount of collection points and then putting the investment into the team member to help do the point of collection sortation reduces your contamination and is a more economical and educational opportunity for your guests? If that makes sense.
Yes, and yes, and yes. Yes, it makes sense. And absolutely, we have tried both ways. And we know that our contamination is much lower when we have it, those waste stations, and we're putting our staff, that responsibility on our staff instead of on guests.
Thank you.
We've just got a couple more minutes for questions. We can also send through questions to speakers afterwards. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead. Jake Neese, Erie County. This is for Lori Johnson and maybe a little bit for Liz. I understand there's a CEDC meeting coming up on June 26th in Durango. Wanted to talk about, that was the first time I saw the map today. And I wanted to know if there are opportunity to add stops on any of the existing routes.
Yeah, I'll take that. So that's just a depiction. So that deck was used, as I said, for a proposal to show an example of what some routes might be. So the Durango stakeholder meeting is focused on transportation. So I would say absolutely please attend and give us your input.
Okay, so that's not a hard fixed map.
Correct,
No,
correct.
no, sir. No, it's not.
Yeah, we have not established the routes yet. Those were potential routes based on preliminary conversations, but that's part of what CEDC and Recycle Colorado are establishing right now.
Great.
Sorry, Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado.
Right, and one for Scott and then Gail.
Okay, I'll do mine together real quick because I think the answer to both is to have follow-up conversations. Scott DeFive with the Glass Packaging Institute. Lori, I've been thinking about the transload operation. If for everyone that wasn't able to be on the trips yesterday, the Glass to Glass facility has invested in its spur, reopened its rail spur, and can take incoming material at Broomfield. And so I think a couple aggregation stops in Colorado, we would like to work with you. So if I can reach out to you afterwards, Lori. And
great, yeah, and I have to jump to a 10 o'clock, so I appreciate that. It was great meeting you. I'm gonna put my email in the chat. But yeah, we'd love that. Anybody that wants to come play on the transload, we'd love to talk to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura.
And Beth, the same thing. I'm gonna try to put my contact information in the chat for you. Your bottles, if they're not having any recycled content from Trichlor Braun, are being imported from a foreign country. The glass that's made in the United States all has recycled content in it. So let's try to get you a different supplier.
All right. Thanks, Scott. And one final question from Gail.
Yes, thank you. Gail Gary, Steamboat Springs City Council. And just following up on Clinton's question, I wanted to ask Deb Adams kind of the similar question in terms of the trailers. That's what a great idea and great idea to bring attention to what you're doing. But I'm curious if you have those staffed, and if not, kind of just how you handle the contamination.
We don't have them staffed. We just kind of deal with the contamination. We try to educate people on social media and through articles, but it's not that prevalent that we need it staffed. Volunteering is a challenge in this county because we have over 60 nonprofits and everyone's looking for a volunteer. So at the moment, it is not staffed and it is free. And we believe that people really appreciate the convenience.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you think actually probably the people that come and use it are a little more particular and understand what they're putting in and the need to not put other things in it? Do you see that?
Yes, we have had an issue for whatever reason. Someone likes to put cardboard in with mixed paper. Fortunately, it is easy enough to take out, but we feel it's a long-term process in just educating people to cooperate and not contaminate it.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Oh.
Can I just answer for Deb? My name says Deb Adams, but I'm actually Joni Liebman. also with High Country Recycling, we do have a core group of volunteers that come in every Wednesday and Friday that do the sorting as the staff do the baling. So I thought I would mention that.
Great. Thanks very much for that addition. And thank you very much to all of our presenters. We really value your time today. And we'll be sending out your slides. And if you need any contact information from the board members, please feel free to reach out. Now moving on to our next agenda topic, and that is to receive some updates and follow-ups from Pete and CAA. Over to you, Pete.
Perfect, thank you. All right, if we can move a slide forward, that would be great.
Pete,
yeah.
I may speak up just in case.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
So I think the goal is to walk you through a bit of the consultation update. I know there was an update provided at Recycle Colorado, but I thought it would be helpful to provide that update again. Talk about a bit of an update on the technical meeting that we had, some other follow-ups from the last meeting, and then move into talking about the producer dues methodology and promotion education. So hopefully that works for everybody. So I think we've talked already a little bit about the program plan consultation process. As I mentioned, I think before, we are planning to reach out to a number of different key stakeholder groups. I think sometimes we'll look to mix some of the groups together where possible. So, you know, material recovery facilities and end markets may at times make sense to present to and consult with both of those groups at the same time, as there are some issues that overlap each other. But we will be looking to run consultation sessions over the period of time. So producers will be looking at haulers, material recovery facilities and markets, compost facilities, local governments, tribes, non-residential covered entities. And I would add to that, we'll probably likely look at doing multifamily buildings and non-residential covered entities probably at the same time. I think we've been having some internal discussions about that. It probably makes more sense to include those conversations together. Nonprofit and general public. We just moved one slide over. So we don't have a lot of time. So I think we'll be looking over the next couple of weeks to be starting to send out emails to the various groups that are out there to get dates into people's books. I think we'll be sort of aiming for, at least in that July period, we'll be looking for sort of mid to end of July for those sessions. Certainly, as we look to book those, I know I've tried to pull a few people aside just separately just to say, is there a better day of the week, for example, for local governments to meet? You know, is there a day that's typically not dedicated to council meetings or a time? So, you know, certainly we want to try to set these up in a way that are that allows all of those participants to potentially take advantage or take the opportunity to. There are some of you that may fit into multiples of these categories, and that's fine. I think we want to try to make sure that we're getting as much feedback as possible during that time period. And again, I think, you know, all of this is potentially a little bit subject to change. I think we're going to run some of these sessions. There may be a need to do some more. I imagine there may be certain areas where we have consultations where individual groups may not want to provide specific information as part of those meetings. So I think we'll look for other opportunities as well to connect where, you know, there may be sensitivities around some of the information that folks might want to share. So we'll try to balance that off. But I think the idea is to try to bring groups together that likely share some of the same types of core issues. So there's going to be some issues that may not be relevant to all of the parties. And so I think that's why we're trying to separate things out to some degree and focus more in certain areas with certain groups. Stop there and just see if there's any questions around that consultation side. For it.
I think Carolyn is first.
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. I have two questions. I am curious about the blending in. I've been trying to shift to using the term multi-unit housing versus multi-family housing for what it's worth. Multi-unit housing. And the other non-residential covered entities, if I remember correctly, it's like resorts and event centers and small businesses, and it feels like I'm sort of curious, other than not being single unit residential, what those, if I'm remembering those categories correctly, and if so, how them being grouped together makes sense. Is that fine?
Yes, so I think a good point on, do we call it multi-unit? Do we call it multi-residential? Or do we call it multifamily? I think multifamily, so I think that's why I referred to it that way, but I certainly understand the desire to look at language change around that. So thank you for that. I think the concept of pulling the residential side into those other sort of covered non-residential entities. I think the idea is that they're likely receiving servicing in a similar type of way. So the waste companies that are picking up from those sites may largely be running commercial type of routes to collect from those. So I think that was some of the thinking around it. I think we're still open. I mean, if there's suggestions to say they may fit better but I think there's likely a different conversation that's happening to some degree with the local government, so they don't necessarily fit. Although some of the local governments may be any that are necessarily providing service to multi-residential, but it is an area we cover as part of that too, if there is servicing that's being provided.
Yeah, I guess maybe the perspective I might add, and also just for I know multi-unit housing is not the norm, but it was sort of surfaced through some of the equity work in Fort Collins. So we may be an island of one trying to shift to that terminology, but I understand multi-unit housing and commercial is all service similarly, but I feel like from the stakeholder engagement, they may have different needs for how to make the service work well for them. So I'm just thinking from the perspective of sort of being able to target the conversation to the needs of the groups. And this is not like a sword to die on, but just maybe something to consider in the conversations. I know multi-unit housing, the recycling, it's just a very unique, it's definitely different than the single unit, but also very different than businesses. And if it's helpful for me to provide any perspective outside of, I've been multi-unit housing has been part of my responsibility for a number of years at the city, so I have some experience that perhaps I could share. But
so that would be very helpful. I mean, I think, and again, part of the thinking too was a bit, and I take your point that it's not exactly the same as commercial settings, but often there are similar types of challenges. Space is often a big issue in commercial setting as it is for multi-residential. So how you service those units is often a question. Can you actually get trucks in safely to pick up? But no, certainly open to making adjustments on that side.
Just something to consider for however y'all want to go forward. And the second question I had is, and this may be a broader piece, but I forget the exact language in the plan, but I know environmental justice is one of the sort of components of the implementation here. And I don't know if it makes sense to be sort of a separate environmental justice, sort of a subject line, or how that is being woven in with the stakeholder engagement happening so far. I just feel like that's also a topic we haven't talked about much as a board. And so it's fine if there's not an answer right now, but I would like to understand at some point how that's being integrated in with the stakeholder engagement and some of the other pieces.
So I think the current plan, I think on the schedule that's there, I think the environmental justice groups would fit under the non-governmental organization, so the NGO category there. I think that's how we were thinking of making sure that we were touching base those groups. EcoCycle helped to sort of run some sessions for us during the needs assessment with environmental justice groups and other environmental groups around how do we reach out to and connect with different communities across Colorado, especially those that potentially of recycling. So I think there was some really good feedback, and I think there's some nice opportunities there around how we look at again, trying to address some of those areas where there may be stronger communication is needed in the state. So I think that's that meeting that's set out. But we could certainly consider whether that needs to be completely separated out from the environmental groups and the environmental justice side.
Liz, I think you had a question first.
I had Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado. My question, Peter, is these stakeholder groups, you are sending out emails. Will there also be information on the Colorado page of the CAA website that we could direct people to that want to engage in the stakeholder process?
Yes, the intention is for us to put a separate page up like we did for the needs assessment. So there'll be a landing, I don't know how to, the right wording, but the landing page within the Colorado section on our website that would include information on the sessions that we are running, provide general updates of what's happening. And and as we move towards then publishing a draft, then the availability to have access to that document.
Does that answer your question, Liz? And Gail?
Gail Gary, Steamboat Springs City Council. In terms of your general public stakeholder group, what's the intention in terms of how you're going to get that word out and engage, the general public? Obviously, in addition to the website and the landing page, how else will you get out the information and gather it? Maybe hosting general public kind of meetings? You looking for groups to speak to?
Yeah, so I think we'll likely be also, so let me add a couple more things before I forget them. So I think, Liz, to your question earlier as well, I think we'll also be making sure that there is an email that will allow individuals to provide feedback on that sort of landing page. We'll also be looking to utilize the resources that CDPHE already has in place. So how do we make sure that we're also using where people may be going to get information on CDPHE's website? The program plan development and just the general EPR regulation. So I think we'll be looking for those channels. I don't have a specific answer for you yet. I don't think on the full outreach to the general public. I would imagine that would largely be worked through from CDPHE and looking to connect with the various trade associations and things like that so we can get the word out. And that would include NGOs through their channels. But I could follow up as well with HDR, who's sort of helping to sort of more or less coordinate the consultation that's coming through about that.
And would you consider some sort of survey?
Yes, we are considering that sort of questionnaire that will be potentially, I think, actually separated out for different type of group that we're meeting with to get more specific feedback in some of the areas that we're looking.
Okay, thank you.
Right, any other questions on the consultation update? And Pete, back to you.
Okay.
We do have a hand raised
Oh, sorry.
online.
Oh, sorry.
No, yeah, Barrett Jensen has a question. Barrett, feel free to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was a little delayed. So Barrett Jensen with Waste Connections. Here, quick question for you. So the consultation portion, is that primarily going to be requesting feedback on what's kind of currently been going or being discussed? Or is there going to be requests for new information? I'm just thinking kind of back to the needs assessment when NDAs were necessary. Is that going to be necessary on this round?
Yes, it could be, Barrett. I think, you know, there's always potentially additional information that might be helpful for us to understand what's happening. Reimbursement formula, I'm sure, there may be additional groups that want to provide additional information around the reimbursement formula. So there may be the need for potentially other NDAs, although I dread NDAs because I feel like there's about 40 different iterations before we finally get a signature on them. But I'm not a lawyer, clearly. But I think there very well may need NDAs in place if there's some specific areas that companies want to provide feedback or municipalities want to provide or others that may be sensitive information.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted to kind of bring it up just in case that was something you thought was going to be necessary, because like you said, they can take time.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of work that happened as part of the needs assessment. It provides us with a base of information, but it's a point in time set of information. Dynamics change quickly within the sector. And so understanding potentially new situations, new issues that might have come up, information that may not have been caught, I think will be helpful for us. So I certainly don't think we want to restrict or any potentially additional information that might be helpful to inform our decisions moving forward that may not have been captured as part of the needs assessment.
Thank you.
All right, and Rick, question?
Yes, Rick Cater, Merce, Boulder County. So, see, I was under the impression that we signed these NDAs and they were for the duration of the information gathering process, which includes this next section. So, because it's going to be a nightmare for you to have to go back out and get all new NDAs. So was there an end date to that, or is that how it works?
So it'll depend on the specific non-disclosure agreement that was signed. So we set up a draft of an NDA, and that draft was changed multiple times. So we probably have about at least half a dozen different versions of that NDA. So it may be a bit specific. I need to double check. I think some of them may speak specifically to the needs assessment that was being undertaken at the time. Certain organizations may want additional certainty. And that may be a quick fix, Rick, if it's just a question of saying we need to change needs assessment now to program plan development. And that's, and everything else was agreed to. I think we can easily make those changes moving forward. So that it may be as simple as that. If that's what's.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions from the group online? All right, keep going then, Pete, thank you.
Okay, just next slide over. Okay, so did we miss one slide? Did we deal with the technical work? Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So the technical meeting, our first technical meeting, we did cover the minimum recyclables list, the responsible end markets list, and reimbursement. There was a number of questions that came through that, and I don't know whether the feedback has been posted for the board to see, but all of the feedback that we receive, I think we have provided responses to. I just don't know whether necessarily Darla had meant to put it up. So
It's in our comments folder.
Okay.
Or comments.
Okay, so it should all be there for everybody's availability. If you or sorry, if anyone wasn't in attendance to that, there is access to all of that information. There is a follow-up, I think, that I just wanted to come back to. So, you know, I think we talked about verification of end markets for smaller or emerging markets that might have some concerns with, I think, which was being proposed. And I just wanted to follow up on that because, you know, I wanted to make sure it was clear when we talk about ISO certification that the ISO certification we were talking about was directly a requirement of the auditor that CA will use, the third-party auditor that CA will use. So it's not an expense of the actual company. So I just wanted to make sure I understood, or we understood exactly what the potential barriers might be to smaller end markets. So when we look at what we'll be asking for, you know, we're looking for, are those companies in compliance with the general laws and regulations that are in place? Do they have a chain of custody that's in place? Are there recycling yield calculations? So kind of mass balance within those facilities. And then, you know, are they running and have the proper types of environmental controls in place in those facilities? So I look at those things and I would say initially, are there any of those areas that we think potentially a smaller organization or end market might not be able to achieve? I would initially look at it and say, to me, that all seems like, you know, sort of general, reasonable types of things to be able to ask. So I guess I'm just following up on this just to understand, what of those may be more of a concern? How do we also define, if we're looking at smaller end markets, if we want to provide a separate type of approach for smaller, more emerging end markets, how do we define that? Because we'll need some kind of a definition if we're going to try to treat some markets a little bit differently than others. And then obviously, are there concerns with a level playing field? There's always going to be that concern around, are we treating people differently within the marketplace? We want to make sure there's healthy competition. And if we're treating one by saying, you don't need to do this, but a bigger one, we're saying, yeah, you got to do all of this stuff. Is there potentially a concern around level playing field? So I'll put that out there. Certainly, we can come back to it at another point if people want to take time to think about that. But I think, you know, as a team came back to sort of have a conversation on this and look at potentially how we might address some of the concerns that were brought forward by the advisory board. These were, I think, some of the areas we were struggling just to make sure that we understood clearly.
Are there any comments at this point or questions?
Rick Cater, Boulder County Emergency. I think it is super important to understand that these little companies seed scale up companies. So it's important that we identify that they're the entrepreneurs. They're the ones that are taking risks, and they eventually get bought up by the big guys, and that technology is absorbed in the overall system. But they do provide that incubator kind of availability, those small guys that are taking those risks. So we have to try to figure out how, just like the wallboard guys that made the wallboard out of the carton stock. I mean, it took them a long time to get going, and they're still struggling. So it's hard to we shouldn't put barriers up, and I appreciate that it doesn't appear that we're putting any more barriers up than we need. Are these actual site visits or are these telephone audits? Is your auditor going to the end market, flying to India or wherever it is, making sure that it's appropriate?
So I think there's a question as to sort of how much rigor is going to be placed in. So there may be, I think, a bit of a risk assessment that we might look at facilities to say, what are our higher risk potential facilities or areas of concern? basing potentially the level of audit or assurance based on that. I think, Wolf had spoken to previously about the fact that, companies operating in Colorado already have to some degree some level of reporting that's happening around emissions as well as how materials are being managed. So we might look at that and say, well, it's probably a lower risk from a Colorado perspective. So we don't need to apply the same rigor to other types of organizations. We, at the end of the day, want to make sure that from a compliance perspective, we're meeting what the act is, and we're also trying to build confidence, which I think we've heard quite a bit about around concern around confidence of are my materials actually being managed properly. And so there's a bit of that balance. And I take your point, Rick, on the point of entrepreneurs, but you often run into the problem too with sometimes entrepreneurs selling more than they deliver. And so we also do want to make sure that we're not sending materials to someone that doesn't quite work.
Absolutely. Understood. Thank you.
Okay, well, we can come back to that at a later point, but something that I think certainly we would look for feedback as we move forward in sort of more developing that approach to verifying responsible end markets.
Thank you. Gail Gary, Steamboat Springs City Council. I did just have a thought. The question would be, would there be any other certifications that you might be able to use, right, in place of the ISO?
So the ISO only applies to our auditor. So
okay.
It only applies to our auditor. So all we're looking for is making sure that there's faith that we've got a third party that actually knows what they're doing and they know what to look for. So that ISO certification is really about making sure that the individual has the abilities to be able to undertake the activities we're asking them to.
Okay, so I may be maybe an offline conversation. I may be misunderstanding then in terms of what your concern is about the entrepreneur and not trying to put any sort of unnecessary. So
it was originally that if you were asking a small mom and pop to get ISO certified, when you heard KW spends that kind of money they do on ISO certification, that would be a barrier.
But I think
and he's saying that is not the case. We're not we're not requiring that the producer be ISO certified, only that the auditor be ISO certified. And as far as I know, ISO certification is nothing more than a very rigorous review of your data tracking and your check-in balances, right? Isn't that what ISO is more like?
Yeah.
Everyone, just a quick reminder from the interpreter, just remember to speak up at a conversational pace and only one person at a time for interpretation purposes. We still have the camera going with the room, but I know it can be a little odd in regular conversation, but also if you announce your organization when you're speaking, it probably is a lot easier for people online to follow.
all right. Thanks for that reminder.
So Peter Hargreaves, CA, I'll try to, and I apologize to the interpreters. There still is things that we're going to be asking people for. The auditor's potentially going to be there are steps we're asking people to take as part of a verification of an end market. So that I don't want to relay that we're not asking anything of these organizations, but I think it's just a question of, is it a reasonable level that we're asking people to say, we want to be able to know, what are you taking? How is it actually being managed and what's coming out the back end and where is it going? And that's fundamental to it, to make sure that there's, some ability to know whether we're sending it to Texas or whether we're sending it in state or whether we're sending it to India or wherever else, that there is that level of faith or rigor within the system to make sure that that material is being managed properly.
Wolf Gray, CDPHE, I'm just going to add on, that's direct requirement out of the act. Like, it's the statutory requirement that we have, that we must use responsible end markets. So we need a procedure to verify whether or not it's a responsible end market.
Yes, and Becca with the Colorado Attorney General's Office, responsible end market is defined in the act. It is fairly general, but it does provide some specific guidelines that we're required to follow.
I will keep moving for the sake of time. Just the next slide over, we move now into just follow-ups from the other meeting we did. We did talk about producer compliance again. We did talk as well about increasing targets. Again, we have provided the feedback. I just wanted to provide the opportunity if there was anything additional that folks wanted to add to any of these sections. We will be coming back to all these sections, but this is a bit, again, an iterative process where we're going to be coming back multiple times. So you'll get very tired of hearing me talk about things, but hopefully by that point, we'll have agreement around the path forward. But just wanted to open it up if there was anything else on those other areas since we met.
Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado. Can you give us an update on the registration of producers? You know, that was a concern that you shared with us last month. And as a result, the deadline was extended. And I have noticed an aggressive push in social media channels. And I know you just hosted a meeting with producers. Has that resulted in more registrations?
Yes, so the registrations are increasing week by week. The number of so the week by week numbers are going up steadily as we move towards July, and then I guess July has been CAA's sort of set timeline when we would like to see things producers to sign up. There is lots of work that needs to be undertaken. We want to make sure producers are ready as to what they need, information they need to report. So we want to try to get them in as soon as possible so that we can start informing them and making sure that they're ready to report. The deadline has been changed in the rule to October the 1st. That still needs to be approved, which I think is hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, tomorrow. The commission is meeting tomorrow to approve, will hopefully approve the section 18 draft regulations. And those are all the EPR regulations.
So that will help. But yes, we are trying as many channels as possible to make sure that we are registering as many producers as possible. I think there still is some concern we hear often from producers where the rules are still to some degree in flux in jurisdictions, and so they want more certainty before they actually register. And so that has created some, I think, concerns about whether they need to register now. But we're pushing as hard as possible to make sure that we get as many. I can look in future meetings to bring the numbers back. I don't have the most up-to-date numbers, but as I said, the week by week is steadily increasing over the last month. Okay, next slide.
We'll skip this break and keep going through.
Okay, perfect. Do we need to stop for any comments from the public or?
That is at a later time. After this presentation, we'll have just a brief moment for public comment. Yeah.
Okay. All right, wanted to move into a new area, producer dues. So there is a requirement for the pro to set out how producer dues will be set. I've included the full text in here. The producer dues must vary by the type of covered material, whether or not the material is readily recyclable, and be based on the net recycling services cost for each covered material estate. The organization can use up to 5% of the producer responsibility dues collected from producers for administration of the program over the terms in the program. And then it talks a little bit about surplus funds, the financial reserve, and then annual updates around the dues. I'll just keep moving forward. And just for those that may be on the line, in other states, they talk about producer dues as producer fees. They talk about it a fee setting. Colorado is very specific that this is due setting. So I apologize sometimes if I may flip back and forth, but the language in Colorado is producer dues. So we have been working around trying to set up the methodology for how we might deal with producer dues for the program plan. We've tried to put forward to start with some guiding principles. So we have some guiding principles that we'll walk you through today. A general sense of the methodology which we put forward. And then we're also making sure, do we have the inputs that we need around modeling what that might look like. Next slide over. So just walk through the proposed guiding principles. So we currently are looking at a set of principles that we would apply to fee setting methodology. First, harmonization. So we're looking to make sure that we can set a national fee setting methodology so that we can use that consistently across the state. Now, the fee rates will vary state by state, but we're trying as much as possible to make sure that there's some coherency across the country as to producers and what they might understand their fees or their dues might be within each of the individual states. Fairness, so producers supplying covered materials to consumers must contribute to the costs of the recycling system, including those whose materials are not recycled. Material specific costs, fee rates should reflect the material specific management cost in each state using the best available data. Commodity revenue fee rates will reflect state specific commodity revenues and these revenues will be attributed to the corresponding material categories that earned them. Eco-modulation will account for the modulation policies. Responsible end markets will factor in the development and maintenance of viable responsible end markets with any associated costs attributed to market development in those areas. Clarity, so fee setting materials and consultations will be prepared and conducted in a manner that clearly communicates for producers principles, methodology, and approach that the pro is looking to determine those dues. Slide. So our proposed approach, and I've sort of built a bunch of slides to sort of talk about how we're looking to apply the approach, but we're looking to allocate material management costs, the covered materials based on their shared supply tons into the market. So trying to uphold the sort of polluter pays principle. So materials with large supply quantities will pay for a large share of the system's costs. Material cost variations exist by incorporation of material specific cost indices generated by activity-based costing. And I'll talk a little bit about how that'll work in a couple of slides. Program revenues are attributed to the materials that earned those revenues to reduce their share of material management costs. So materials that may be more valuable on an end market perspective will be their overall costs will be reduced as part of that. I think we often talk about aluminum having higher rates. So because they're receiving potentially a higher price for that would reduce their costs in the system. And I think that covers most of that. I think, again, we're trying to ensure fairness by differentiating material fees based on supply costs and revenues. I think currently right now we're looking at about 70 to 80 categories of different types of material that are put into the marketplace and separating out costs to those materials to the overall system. Next slide over. So activity-based costing model. So again, this is looking at allocating the recycling system cost to the different types of material. This is not a new concept in EPR. This is something used in numerous jurisdictions for decades. So the idea is having accurate science-based material cost allocation to enable the pro to defensively set fees for those materials and ensuring that there is no cost or cross subsidization of cost between different types of packaging. So we want to make sure that the costs are allocated directly to the materials that are flowing through the system. So from collection through to sorting, through to end markets. I think I've covered that already. That we've used this type of model has been used in numerous other jurisdictions. And again, we're in the process right now of developing that model to calculate a sort of cost to manage index for each material that will be used for this purpose. And I'll talk through, I think, how that works as we get into some of the further slides. Next slide over. So again, when you think about costs in the recycling system, costs of materials will differ, right? So the question is, are we collecting those curbside? Are we collecting them through depot? So you may have different costs associated with materials that may require, different types of handling at a depot versus curbside. You'll have the cost associated with pulling that material to a MRF, and that includes potentially consolidation points, transfer stations where you're consolidating those materials. You'll have the costs associated with sorting those materials through the MRF and separating those materials out. You may as well have, like we saw with glass yesterday, you might have secondary processors that are involved in the process. And then you'll have, for each of those material sets, you'll have potentially the value that comes out of the responsible end market that material is getting sent to. Next slide over. I'm trying to drink as I'm told that not drinking is going to get me in trouble here. So, we just laid out in this slide just some of the key components to what we need to know as part of looking at setting dues for Colorado. So we need to understand the supply tons. So how much of each material is getting supplied into the market in Colorado. And again, we have estimates on that as part of the needs assessment. We need to understand what the costs to manage, so material specific costs within the system. So what does it cost to collect, sort, process that material and develop that into the end market? You understand what commodity prices are there, and we can look at projections. We all know that commodity prices do bump around over a year, but looking at creating an understanding of what those prices might look like, and then looking at the recycling rate for each of those materials to understand exactly what the revenues might be associated with each of those materials. We're allocating those recycling rates back to those material sets.
For the recycling rate, are you thinking you're going to use like national EPA figures for that, or more localized?
Localized numbers for its recycling rate. Yeah. So we can use some of that as part of the needs assessment. Obviously, we'll be getting better data as we move forward, and so that will be refined. The fee setting will be refined as we move forward. Next slide. So this is just really meant to be an illustration. I think I mentioned earlier that, we're looking at probably over 70 categories of materials. So we've just tried to provide just an idea as to how this works. So you have the amount of material that's supplied. And again, these aren't real numbers. They're not real factors, but you have the amount of material supplied, and then you have that cost to manage, which is the CTM. So you have a factor that's attached to that. You have the supply then times the cost to manage, and then a share. So then you look at the cost. So you've got the overall cost, then you're allocating it by material type. Then you have the revenue side. So you have your recycling rate, the price that might be associated with each of those materials, and then the revenue. And then that will give you then a total material managed cost for each. And then that moves you then to applying a cost for each of those materials. So again, this is just a high level type of example, just to kind of walk you through the type of process that we're looking to establish the fees for each of those.
This is the fee.
Go ahead, Rick.
Peter,
Sorry, dues.
yeah, so these are the dues that the packaging folks are, what you're paying the MRFs, right? You're not
Correct.
taking into consideration. Okay, and the cost of doing, the cost to manage is one number, the eco-modulation number is another number, correct?
Peter Hargrave, VA. So there is an eco-modulation factor that needs to be included as part of the program plan development. And then there's another eco-modulation factor that gets added on, I think by CDPHE potentially after. So there may be two sets of eco-modulation. But there is a degree already within the model that's here that is already eco-modulating. Because you're looking at the materials that are easier to sort, have less costs associated with them, that are easier to collect, have less costs associated with them. Materials that have higher values at the end of life helps to reduce the cost. And if you're recycling more of that material, that revenue gets associated with paying lower. So there is already, to some degree, I would say, eco-modulation that already happens as part of the overall model.
Okay. Thank you. Be nice to see it when it gets an example of how that'll play out.
I think what we tried to do there is of that example to show how costs are being allocated by each material.
Okay, so I'm a recycling center. I bring in the material. There's a cost associated, let's just call it aluminum. Aluminum has a 1,200 ton value. So are you saying that you're going to pay the MRF the cost less the value factored in? And so is that what you're saying?
This has nothing to do with what we're reimbursing.
Okay.
This is about how we're allocating. So if the costs of the overall system, as in this table, are 150 million, then this is how we're allocating those costs to each of the producers. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. How do producers of compostables fit into this scenario?
I knew you were going to ask me.
It's time.
Yeah. So there is a bit of a difference, I think, we're having some internal discussion, but there's a bit of a difference in how the act applies to compostable materials versus the other materials. Compostable materials is really based on infrastructure investments, plus potentially overarching administrative costs associated with the program. And so I think the same concept we're talking about here would apply, but the materials aren't being collected and paid for by the pro. So this diagram here is probably not, this diagram here is not as applicable. So I think as we go into sort of the next step, so this is the material management cost, then there's going to be other allocation that we're going to do. So I think there's probably for compostables, how much is being supplied, what's the cost of the investments that we're making into the sector. That will then get allocated for compostable materials. And then what is the share of the overhead of the administrative, the promotion, education, potential, those types of things that would get caught and allocated.
So follow-up question, Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. What is complicated to help CAA and CDPHE kind of walk through this whole scenario? Because I think it's new. What are the resources that are missing you guys need that can be brought to the table?
I think part of what's gonna drive the, some of the compostable pricing is a bit of how we're looking at investing in compost infrastructure over the period of time. And so I think that will become part of the main generator of cost within the model. So we haven't yet about that piece. That piece is being worked on internally right now around what that might look like. So we'll be bringing that back, and I think that's where we really want more feedback with the compostable material side.
Scott Defied, Lab Packaging. Just to confirm, this is an illustrative model without actual.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so don't, I tried to say it right in the title of the slide, just to make sure it's illustrative. It's not meant to be actual numbers that we've put. I think we've just tried to provide, again, some sense as to, different materials. So flexibles, how much are they supplying to the marketplace? Generally, they would have a larger cost associated with managing those materials, and we've tried to illustrate that as part of it, as an example, as compared to paper. So, but it's just meant to be illustrated. These aren't real numbers.
No, I know, well, the recycling rates don't match what the needs assessment found, and
correct.
The recycle market is not an accurate depiction of the costs.
Totally. And it's not meant to be, because otherwise I think it would be a much larger conversation today. I think all we're trying to talk to today is how are we thinking about the actual methodology to put this together? Can we land on the general concept? And then I have no doubt as
that we're going to flip that negative sign in front of our illustrative material.
Again, that modeling still needs to be done, but I have no doubt that whenever there's conversations around producer dues, it is, I won't say a bloodbath, but I know that every group will have certain perspectives on what their pricing should be. And it will be a fruitful conversation.
Yes, I look forward to
it. Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado. So am I understanding what you're saying here is there will be one set of obligations on the producers that you're interchangeably using? There would be a formula that would say you as a producer, because you're putting this material into the marketplace and at this size, at this quantity, you have a dues to the organization. And then would be a separate fee associated with each item sold in Colorado. Am I incorrect? There will be one, okay, there will be one assessment of what the producers are obligated to pay that will both support the running of the PRO and represent the individual cost of each individual package. That will be encapsulated into one, and that's what you're trying to get at with this formula.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. A couple of questions. One is I didn't see the copy of the presentation anywhere in the email to us or in our folder. And so I don't know if that can be anywhere. I was trying to go back to one of the slides to see if I could answer my own question, but I can't find the presentation. So I guess just if we can get a copy of the presentation that we could look at concurrently, that I often go back and forth between slides as my brain is processing things.
Yes.
Specific to this, I feel like maybe I'm just being a little bit slow, or maybe I have a question some other people have. I'm not sure which. So I'm trying to walk through this example here. So we have the first column is the supply tons. The second is the cost to manage index. That's the piece I was going to go back to a previous slide to remember how you're putting that together. But it comes up with this sort of like random number. Looks like those aren't percentages. They don't add up to 100. It's some factor of the cost to manage that material. And then the third column, you take the supply, column 1 times column 2, and then it's a percentage of, I guess I'm just sort of, I'm trying to just follow the logic along here, and maybe I'm way too in the weeds. It's not helpful.
So sort of at a very high level, if you want to think about it, you have X amount of tons.
Yeah.
That is getting supplied into Colorado.
Yeah.
And you're looking then, and sorry, so you have X amount of material that's getting supplied, and you have a certain amount of costs that we expect the overall system to cost producers. So we need now a way to apply what is the actual cost to manage the materials on an individual material basis. And so what we're trying to do is take that and say, okay, well, this is the amount of material that's supplied. This is a factor that looks at what the impact or the cost of that material is within the sort of collection, sorting or just collection and sorting side. And then you're also looking at how much is actually being recovered and the revenue associated with that. And by taking through those steps of saying how much is supplied, then you have a percentage potentially breakdown that you can do of that side. And you have what the sort of cost to the system is of that material. And then you have the revenue side, and those elements then are building what the cost of that material is to the actual system itself.
I understand that concept. I'm having a hard time translating that in my brain into this example. Doesn't mean that it's not. So I don't know how big a deal that is. I don't know if it is a confusing format for other folks, that if maybe just it is maybe another iteration.
You can take it,
public.
Yeah, we could take it back to look at how to improve the communication for sure.
But I thank you for bringing us back to the concept that was getting a little bit lost.
Okay, let's move forward. And again, I'll just add to this. If we can move one slide forward. Thanks, Wolf.
We go too far forward.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So you have the system costs, you have the by material costs, you're offsetting revenue. And then you'll have other elements where we may look at, or we will look at adding other potential costs associated with it. And I'll speak to this as well, where we have things like reserves, we have the administration associated with that are more shared costs across the whole organization, and those fees that need to be applied as well. And then that will give you your net dues. One more slide forward. There are some other considerations we need to take into account. Publishers will, or when built within the Act, there is the need for them to potentially look at some other type of in-kind donation, so potentially paying or providing advertising in lieu of paying dues. And so we need to work with the publishers around up to the agreement. So that needs to get taken into account, obviously, on the promotion and education budget side, as well as on the paper side, because that material will still be coming back through the system. We also need to look at free riders. So producers that are unaware of their obligations or are underreporting what they're supposed to do. We need to look at packaging supplied by exempt or so small producers, or there are certain material types that are exempted as well that may still make their way back into the system. So we need to take those factors into account. We are looking at, for producers that are free riding within the system, that we are looking at if they join late, that there will be potentially retroactive fees that will be owed by those organizations for previous years. The act also requires us to look at flat duty payable for low volume producers and how that should be done. That is a very difficult thing, I would say, at this point to set, not knowing how much material all of our producers supply into the marketplace. And we won't know that information until producers report, which won't be until January. So that does potentially create some issues for us as we're looking to establish whether we are setting a flat rate and how we set that flat rate. And just to give you an idea, when we don't know exactly how much material producers are supplying into the marketplace, when we get that information back, we might look at it and say, okay, well, it makes sense to have 3 tiers. And these are what the tiers should be because, you know, we can see in the data that it makes sense that there's some sort of groupings of types of producers, how much they supply to the marketplace. We don't know that yet because we don't have the data. We could say, well, look at other jurisdictions and that will give you the information. Because we don't really have an operational packaging program, that makes it more difficult, as well as the fact that there is differences between each state, how they set their small producer requirements. So in Colorado, it's higher than a lot of other jurisdictions. It's 5 million in gross revenue. A lot of other jurisdictions are lower than that. Am I okay for volume? Okay, sorry, the next slide's already up. So again, the costs that go into the actual due itself. So we have material management costs, we have non-material management costs that gets into, again, the promotion education, regulatory oversight, program development. We have the program reserves and then material specific costs. And again, we've included the methodology in for each of these. So for non-material management costs, we're looking at 70% based on materials management costs proportion, 30% equally distributed to each of the materials. I've talked for a long time, so there's some questions now to talk about. I put down some suggestions, but I'm happy to open it up, you know, to start with, because we've talked about a lot of things and yeah.
Rick, go ahead.
I'm here, Merce, Boulder County. So I keep conflating the producer's fee and the MRF's cost, and what you described there. And I know, so you're taking into consideration the value of the materials that they introduce into our system. And then you're discounting their fee based on the value of that material, right?
Correct.
So for the collection guys, there is no impact to them on the value of the materials. So their cost is their cost. So there can't be any adjustment on their cost based on revenue because they don't realize any of the revenue. The MRF realizes the revenue on the scrap sales.
But I guess, let me put it this way. Your costing is based on the cost it takes to process the material you MRF plus the revenues that you're getting back.
Just mine, yes.
Correct. The revenues you're getting back, and that provides a cost, an overall cost to manage the basket of materials that goes through the MRF, right? So all we're simply doing is trying to apply that, taking the gross cost of the overall management system and applying that so that we can then break out the individual costs for each of the materials. This doesn't impact how we're reimbursing MRFs or collectors. It's just a way to say we're trying to break out that basket of materials that's coming through your MRF in a way that is fair to the producers. So material is easier to sort than another. One has more value than another. That's going to impact your price,
right?
Because you're getting, at the end of the day, cost of whatever it is to manage. If the OCC and the OCC markets are strong, that's going to provide revenue and it's gonna decrease your overall cost.
Well, it doesn't decrease my cost, it dilutes my cost, right? Because the cost is the cost. But I think I understand what you're saying. I just think if you're, how are you on a month over month basis changing that fee? Because the value of materials changes month over month, so their fee will change month over month and our cost then will.
Totally. And so in setting producer dues, we can't adjust on a monthly basis on that side. So I think we're looking at average rates that are happening over that period of time. And obviously there's going to be things that we can predict and we can't predict. And that's why reserves are important to make sure that if there are potential issues that we've got the ability to be able to cover those. And again, we're adjusting these rates on an annual basis.
Sure. I was under the impression, to Elizabeth's point earlier, that there would be a fixed fee for processing and this eco-modulation would be a separate thing. That if you're aluminum, you generate a lot of revenue, then that is very small. And if you're a number 6 producer of plastics, your eco-modulation fee is very large to encourage you to try to find alternative packages to get there. So that's not the case. You confirmed with her that is not the case.
Sorry,
that the eco-modulation fee and that they're decoupled, and that this fee here is just their participation based on their volume and the value. But the eco-modulation fee is a separate fee that's trying to encourage them to go away from using a number 7 or a number 6 plastic and move towards a better one.
So the eco-modulation is going to be a factor that's going to be added afterwards. And it's going to potentially then move rates up and down based on a number of factors that include everything from, reduction, recycled content. There's a whole bunch of factors that we need to take into play. I think we need to look at that as well, based on how do we also make sure that the program has sufficient funds to be able to operate, so that we're not discounting everything so much that potentially there's enough money.
Right. Thank you very much.
Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. I apologize if you've mentioned this, but how often do the producers report to you the amount of materials going into the state?
So they'll report. We need to come back to you on this. Just need to double check, but I think they'll report on an annual basis. But there is potentially adjustments that may be needed to be made in year, because obviously situations change for producers on they may want brands, they may subtract brands. There might be, factors that are coming to play within that. So, but typically it's an annual reporting, and then there may be allowance for adjustments.
Yeah, Mark Petrovich, Republic Services. I understand adjusting the rates monthly is cumbersome, but I would like to suggest that potentially quarterly, because you're going to have massive variable of pricing and commodity within a year. It could fluctuate $5 or $10. It could fluctuate $120 a ton. And so I think annual could be problematic for processors, right? If there's
This doesn't impact
reimbursement.
Right. This isn't about reimbursement. This is just about how do we make sure that we have adequate funds to be able to run the program.
Right.
I think the concern is if we're constantly adjusting the rates on a quarterly basis for producers, it becomes very, very cumbersome. We've got to make sure that they're then, our monetary flow, potentially then we're chasing after people quarterly to get new sets of funds back for them. It just makes it very difficult.
Right. So Mark Petrovich, Republic Services. So the only problem I see with that is if a supplier provides a commodity that has gotten very, very valuable, they're not getting the offset that they would deserve, right? If that commodity was very valuable, which could be a problem for that producer. right? If their costs are being offset by the net, right? And their commodity really is desirable, whatever it may be, and they don't see that offset for a year. And then let's say it goes back down, which it could, right? Then they're missing that benefit as an organization of a reduction of their fee. Does that make sense?
But, you know, because prices are going up and down and we're taking averages, that will get taken into account as we move forward.
Okay, so there'll be an average over the year, right? You'll take an aggregate of the year. It's not gonna be like in January 1, this is where it's at.
No.
You're gonna blend it throughout the whole year.
Yeah, because you're gonna get potentially spikes and valleys throughout a year, and for some materials, you might get certain times of the year that, you know, might be more favorable than others,
So
right?
that's fine. That makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado. To make sure I understood the question and answer, I'm gonna be pedantic and make sure I'm repeating it well. The proposal we're looking at means that what you're describing, Mark, there will be a bit of a lag. So if the value of your material goes up, then the following year, you will see your dues reduced. And if it goes down, the following year, you will see your dues increased. So you will see an impact to your dues, but it will be delayed because the formula will be based on the previous year's commodity prices. Am I getting that correct? Okay. My question is transportation costs factored into the cost to manage materials? In the formula, there's a CTM.
Yep.
So the transport, does that also include, it was clear to me that it included the cost of collection. Does it include the cost to market?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Do it. Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, with compostables, if in our state currently, large producers or processors not accepting them, in theory, I'm not saying we did, but all of a sudden we turn that back on. If you're only monitoring the amount of them coming into the state annually, that amount could flip very quickly and very fast. So I'm just wondering is how do you make sure you're getting the right amount of feed on that type of material, only in when those could replace something else in the stream fairly quickly if we're incentivizing, or not incentivizing, but if we're asking through the EPR compost manufacturers to process compostables live. And you're only checking how many there are in the state annually, how do you keep up with that pace? Because I think it could exponentially grow quickly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think
A
you're
little bit better for me.
You're trying to say, I think, so as the example, if compostable materials make up 5% of the overall stream,
right,
or amount of materials being supplied, packaging materials being supplied into the marketplace, if that moved to 5% in a year, that potentially has a cost factor on the overall system. And how does that get taken into account?
And definitely a cost factor on the processor as well. 100%.
Well, again, so the fees that are getting collected are paying for the overall system. So the fees are there or the money is there to pay for the reimbursements of the materials that are, and that's again fits into the reserves. If there's problems and there's reserves potentially to deal with, well, you may have fluctuations. And again, it's not going to be absolutely perfect in the sense of you're always going to have some fluctuations where commodity rates for certain, maybe all materials or certain sets of materials go up, and that has an impact on the overall system. So there may be additional reserves that come in, and you could likely have a deficit in a year. Again, some of these things are pretty difficult to be able to predict, especially given what we've seen in the last number of years. It can be very difficult to predict. Let me take that question and think about it. I'm not sure I'm going to give you a clear response back on it. And I just want to double check with the team, but I think typically I would have thought that you generally see a sort of trend that happens with certain sectors. It's not necessarily the flip of a switch, and you see a major influx of material. It tends to happen more trending over time, but let me take that back and ask the team on that side. I wouldn't mind chatting with a few folks on it before I can answer it.
Clinton Center, A1 Organics, just to follow up too, is consumers, what they're looking for when it comes to packaging. The push for compostable is really high.
Totally understand that. My supply chains don't always necessarily work as quickly as demand happens within the marketplace. And again, it depends what type of supply we're talking about, whether we're talking about service packaging or whether we're talking about actually packaged materials. But let me take that back to think through.
Yeah, we,
Question online from Barrett.
Yeah, Barrett, feel free to unmute.
Thank you. Barrett Jensen with Waste Connections. So I saw in the cost to manage index, and I do appreciate that there was the inclusion of there being capital that's going to be in there. I'm curious as to how that capital is going to be allocated in the dues. Is it something that, is it going to fluctuate based off of what I guess is decided upon as necessary for whatever product it may be? Or is it like a flat rate that you're saying, hey, we know we need X amount of capital funds and just we're going to annualize it over 5 years, 10 years? How is that capital being worked into the annualized cost?
Yeah, it would be worked into whatever the system costs are, right? So if the capital we're talking about is collection related, that could very well apply to some materials or multiple materials. It really depends. So you know, you may have, given we've been on glass, you may have something specific happening on the glass side where we're putting in specific infrastructure around glass. That collection will get allocated potentially towards the glass material. We have hard to recycle materials, which may require a different type of collection infrastructure and different capital. And then I think, Barrett, potentially what you're talking about too is specific capital that may be more investments in MRFs and what we're expecting. And again, that investment, those types of investments may be more specific to one type of material to ensure that it's we're achieving higher yield rates of that material.
Barrett, I'll let you respond.
Yes, and so that could, use glass as an example. 1 year the dues on that could be really, really high based off of infrastructure needs, and then the next year or years after that could be lower. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, potentially. I think that could be the case. I think we'll be looking to try to create more certainty for producers in smoothing some of that stuff out. But yeah, that potentially could be the case.
Mark, we'll go to you after, but Chris, feel free to unmute on the call as well.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Chris Howes, Colorado Retail Council. Really appreciate the presentation today. Of course, our members at the Retail Council are the very largest retailers in the country or the world. And, I'm sensitive about free riders in this program. Obviously, all of our members are going to be participating and sending in their dues, and those dues will be quite substantial. You might not think of a Walmart or a Best Buy as a producer, but of course, if the product is labeled with the company's name, so here we are. So it feels like we're starting to get to the part of this program where the rubber hits the road and we're starting to talk about money. So just wanted to let everyone know that we're going to be particularly sensitive about free riders. We want everyone to sign up. We hope that's a very easy process. And then I'm intrigued, and I don't know if I have a specific question about this, but just be following this. Flat fees for low volume producers. What makes you a low volume producer? What is the cutoff? Are you going to get some sort of waiver? So, I'll be following that. That interests me quite a bit. And then, having run a very small business for the last 23 years, I think everybody else in the room knows. What I know is that when you send out an invoice, you hope and pray that it comes back on time and in full, but that's not really the way the world works. We are humans and mistakes are made along the way and there are delays. So I'm interested in knowing, like, is there going to be a dispute resolution process in this if we don't get the money in time, and what are the punishments and how are they meted out? So just a kind of a few thoughts for you. Thanks for listening.
So thanks, Chris. I appreciate that and certainly appreciate the support on making sure that your members and others are signed up, are registered. On low volume producers, lots of different approaches that have been taken in other jurisdictions. Typically, there is some type of a flat fee that's applied for low volume producers. Some jurisdictions have upwards of 10 categories of low volume producers and different rates that are applied to each of them. Some have fewer. Again, I think it's difficult for us to sort of figure out what is the right what the right position is without having data to be able to sort of understand what how many producers might fit into sort of lower volume categories. Yeah, we just don't have the data yet, Chris, to do that. So I just, it's hard for me to comment on it without knowing, the different types of amounts of materials that different size producers are putting into the marketplace.
We've only got a few minutes left. But Mark, was your question, do you think it was a quick one, or can we take that one offline? And okay, great. Did you want to break for a moment?
Can I do it?
Yeah, you go. And then yeah, do we want to just break for 2 minutes and then we'll wrap up? We'll got to have a quick discussion on the technical work session coming up on June 25th, and we'll recap. We'll adjourn the session.
And for those online, just an update, we have not received any public comments, so we will change. Oh, we have one public comment. Here, I will let you unmute right now to provide your public comment. Give me just one moment. And I'll give you the opportunity to unmute. Peter, you should be able to unmute now if you'd like to provide your public comment.
Thanks. I'm good with just putting it in the chat. I just wanted to support the board's decision to have your chair go speak to California EPR Advisory Board. After 27 meetings, you guys have a wealth of experience to share. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Peter. Great. And I am not seeing any other comments for those hoping to speak. So we're just going to let people take a quick bathroom break. And then, as Megan said, we will wrap up. Thank you all for all your patience. Yeah, no.
We're back?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
back.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. If you've taken a break online as well. So we've just got a couple of minutes left of the session. We just want to have a discussion on the next technical work session and the topics that that the group would like to cover. So it has been discussed that the recycling content thresholds has been brought up as a topic. Is there any thoughts on that? Is there any other topics that this group wants to cover? With the next session coming up on June 25th. We're open to suggestions. Here are some on the screen. If you're looking at one, reuse, rebuild, combustible packaging, eco-modulation, and education and outreach, which we didn't get to today. We will plan that for another session as well. Caroline?
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. Two comments that are sort of related. One is, so last week was the policy committee, the Recycle Colorado conference. Recycle Colorado is the statewide recycling organization. And as part of that, the policy committee within Recycle Colorado met. And one of the processes for the annual policy committee retreat is to identify things that Recycle Colorado wants to work on. And one of the topics that came up was thinking about communities that have open market systems and how EPR implementation is going to work for them, and how many of the recycled polymers could likely be resources to help support transition. And there was interest in having sort of a working group within Recycle Colorado to sort of help think through this and to help try and support communities. And I have been thinking, I wanted to let this group and CAA know that if they didn't already. And B, I'm not sure exactly the best ways to collaborate. It seems like likely a sort of an additional resource to the work that CAA is doing. And so maybe it's mostly a flag for a conversation outside of the meeting. But it ties into, and perhaps my, I think we all see the world that we work in clearest. And so coming from a local government position, I know in our last technical work session, we kind of talked about, I forget exactly how we phrased it, but some of the details of implementation for different types of communities. We know it's different for communities with contracts and municipal collection and open market. I sort of felt like, I know we had a whole hour allocated to the conversation, but there's so many nuances within each of those that I actually wonder if it would be worth bringing those back as separate, not trying to lump them all together, saying like, right now, we are going to talk about contracted hauling communities, and here are the questions within that. If we have other topics we want to prioritize, great, but I feel like we kind of bounced almost a little bit high level on some of those because there's so many questions in that, at least from my perspective. So if we have other topics we want to prioritize, since that one already had some time, totally fine. If we have space and if that makes sense to other people, that might be a recommendation from me for our next work session.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. Does anyone else?
Rick Cater, Boulder County, I don't think we can ever have enough time talking about eco-modulation, and I would love to re-engage as a.
All right. Any other priorities or comments at this stage?
I'll just add a comment on timing. I think I've been trying to be really clear that Tuesdays almost never work for me. Those are Board of County Commissioner official meetings, which is my primary job function. And so Tuesdays almost never work. So I was really disappointed to see the technical work sessions come back for a Tuesday. I will probably not be able to attend any of those, but I'll listen to the recording and submit comments.
Okay, noted. Thanks, Jake. We'll discuss that with the team. You've got anything else to add there? Okay, great. Does anyone else want to add to the timings? We currently plan 3 topics per session for the 3-hour session. Does anyone agree with Caroline that it also feels like we could go deeper and focus on maybe 1 or 2 topics instead? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Let's just make sure we tie it back to the program plan though. Like, I think sometimes it's important, like we need to stay focused that what we're talking about ties into with what we're trying to implement too. So just so many different things going on with this that need to focus as well. Good for them.
All right. Unless there's anything else, I might move on to wrapping the meeting with just 2 minutes over now. Yeah.
I was Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. I had the speaking face on, so Megan was looking at me. The thought that came into my mind is I appreciate that perspective, Wolf, and it's easy for us to kind of get onto tracks. And at least from my perspective, I welcome CDPG staff or whoever makes sense in that role to help us. If we're starting down the paths that don't support into the program plan, at least from my perspective, please feel free to help reframe us and redirect us.
I will second and reinforce that as well.
All right. All right. Well, thank you all for your time today. And assume no one's still online, but we also thank the glass speakers. Just a really quick recap of the meeting. So we received an update from Peter about CAA's consultation plan, follow up from the technical work session regarding verification of end markets, and then an overview of CAA's principles for guiding principles for producer dues and the proposed approach. We didn't get to the education and outreach portion of the meeting, but we will get to that another time and revisit that. The materials will be posted on the department's website within a few days. Lauren's posted a link in the chat. The next technical work session will be on June 25th at 12:30 till 3:30 p.m. Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I may be out of order. But I do think, I guess I'd like to say we should reconsider the Tuesday technical
Okay.
sessions, given Jake's
Yeah.
issue with, and his conflict with his county board of commission meetings.
Okay.
So I don't know how that all came out in terms of when we were looking at it from a
So we did a
poll.
survey poll, and that was the most attended, most popular day. If group wants us to do another poll to see if there's a different time, there was no time that works for everybody.
Right.
So we can try it again if that's needed.
I guess I would encourage that just again, as as his role in terms of representing county commissioners, and that's conflicting with something that he really can't change. So I don't know, again, that's one voice. We can maybe add it to an agenda or for our next meeting. I don't know, how should we proceed? Or we can just.
I would almost do another poll, to be honest, it'd be the quickest and more.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. We'll make a note of that. And
Thank you.
do
And
another
then,
poll.
of course, all of us, oh, sorry, Junior, remember just to make sure we keep in mind Tuesdays in those polls, or
Yes.
like, don't choose Tuesday again when we know Tuesday's an issue.
It'll be Tuesdays out of the month, so there's usually one Tuesday that does work, so we could do some, I can send you the BOCC schedule if you'd like. But I appreciate that consideration.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah,
We'll make a
Clinton
note of
saying
that.
very organics. I was just gonna say, leave those Tuesdays off, just take the option off the table.
All right.
It's up to you guys.
Thanks.
Well, and sorry, I know we're trying to wrap up. Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. I feel that there's an option in Doodle poll where people can have like a I can't or like an if need be. And I think I think there are probably lots of folks with like hard can't adjust commitments, and then also a lot of things that maybe you can't adjust, but it takes some effort on your side. So maybe if we do another round of Doodle poll, maybe we ask everybody to fill in so we understand whether like hard blocks no matter what and what is like preference. It's impossible to coordinate so many schedules perfectly, I'm sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Noted. All right. Unless there's anything else, I'm going to move into the final portion of the meeting, and thank you all for attending. Thank the members of the public, stakeholders. We value all of your participation, partnership, and insights. It's now time to adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I will make a motion to adjourn. Gail, Gary, Steamboat Springs City Council.
Xander, A1 Organics, I will second that motion.
All in favor? The 27th Producer Responsibility Advisory Board meeting is now adjourned at 11:37 a.m.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.